Chapter 630. Under the terrifying aura that was concentrated in one spot, the 1-acre universe shook violently. All the stars within it and the entire void began to shake and tremble. This shaking and trembling was directly transmitted to the connate, seamless golden core ritual artifact in front of Luo Fan. The Dharma artifact also began to shake strangely. Seeing this, Luo Fan had a thought, and his unimaginable will instantly spread out. In an instant, it traveled through the entire 1-acre universe and penetrated into every inch of the void. As if binding, it directly froze the entire universe, causing the various vibrations in the void and stars to disappear in an instant. The entire universe instantly stabilized, and no matter how much the terrifying aura suppressed it, it did not budge at all. After this, Luo Fan's did not stop. Instead, it continued to penetrate deeper into the universe. It directly penetrated into the universe, twisting the power within the universe into one and directly forming a thin barrier outside the universe. This barrier was faintly discernible and was a transparent and colorless existence. It was tens of thousands of times thinner than a piece of paper. However, its sturdiness had reached an earth-shattering level. It was condensed from the power of the universe and was hundreds of millions of times harder than the so-called diamond. Even if the void was destroyed and collapsed, it would not be able to destroy it. For this universe, such a sturdy barrier was naturally not an easy thing to do. At this moment, the entire universe had long been pushed to its limits, and its speed of development was unimaginably fast. The entire universe had unknowingly reached tens of millions of times its original size, and almost the entire universe was aging at a speed visible to the naked eye. And in front of Luo Fan, the connate seamless golden core ritual was rapidly evolving. The endless light within it flickered wildly, and the speed at which it flickered was tens of thousands of times faster than before. As the light flickered, the surging core chi within Luo Fan's body disappeared at an unimaginable speed. If it was not for the fact that Luo Fan had already completed the 3 flowers at one's prominence and 5 chis collecting one's essence, it would only take a few breaths for him to be sucked dry. He might even directly collapse and disappear, dying. But even so, Luo Fan had a grave expression on his face at this moment. Clearly, even though he could endure all of this, the pressure on him was extremely great. At this moment, the celestial body condensed from energy collided with the universe. An earth-shattering rumble spread out in all directions, and the space that was gradually recovering its order suddenly trembled. Then, it instantly became 1,000 times more chaotic than when it was at its peak. A dense chaotic aura rose into the sky, causing the chaotic state within a radius of several 100 million kilometers to instantly return to its most fundamental chaotic state. Previously, it was only the terrifying aura emitted by the celestial body that caused the void to fall into a chaotic state. It wasn't even a terrifying aura that targeted the void. At this moment, the only thing that affected this chaotic state was the shockwave produced by this astral body attack. Its strength was naturally many times stronger than the terrifying aura that was unintentionally emitted. It was also very natural for it to cause such consequences. Or rather, it should be said that it was only normal for it to cause such consequences. If it did not cause such consequences, it would instead make people wonder if they were hallucinating. The shockwave became stronger and more intense. In the end, the moment it appeared, it broke through a certain limit and naturally gave birth to spiritual sense. After the shockwave gave birth to spiritual sense, the damage it caused to the surroundings did not increase at all. Instead, it rapidly weakened. All of the shockwaves that gave birth to spiritual sense cheered and jumped in joy. They suddenly turned around in a way that went against the laws of the universe and charged towards the cosmos that had collided with the celestial body. This disaster was caused by Luo Fan's powerful will, which had instinctively attacked the Grand Tao. He wanted to obtain the mysteries of the origin heaven from the Grand Tao that could match the strength of his will. This was the backlash of the Grand Tao. It could be said that the appearance of this power was the manifestation of a certain aspect of the Grand Tao. As such, the creation of these shock waves could be said to be naturally formed by the Grand Tao from a certain perspective. It was precisely because of this that after these shock waves broke through a certain limit and obtained the support of the Grand Tao, they were naturally different from other shock waves. Their spiritual sense was clearer, more complete, and more targeted. Only this kind of clear, complete, and targeted spiritual sense could allow these shock waves to return without any waste and join in the attack on the cosmos. The moment these shock waves collided with the cosmos, they naturally condensed and turned into billions of strange creatures that began to attack the cosmos. These creatures were all very strange. Some are Luo Fan had seen before, and some are things that Luo Fan could not even dream of. However, whether it was what Luo Fan had seen or what he had never imagined in his dreams, these creatures were all natural and reasonable, conforming to a certain rule in the Earth's universe. They could develop from the simplest single-celled life form to the billions of forms they had at this moment in a certain way. Furthermore, every single one of these creatures possessed unimaginable power. Each of them condensed their own power and continuously attacked the barrier of the cosmos. The impact was no less than the impact of the celestial body on the cosmos. At that moment, Luo Fan, who was in the middle of the cosmos, had his eyes wide open. He gave off an unyielding aura. Power and core chi surged around him, and his body shone with golden light. The 5 halos behind his head spun and vibrated even faster, and the time between the 3 flowers opening and closing became shorter. The petals that floated out became even more numerous. They simply turned into a monstrous river that rushed from the halos into the magic tool in front of him. At that moment, the golden light that the magic tool emitted had become countless times stronger. It connected all the voids in the entire universe, and the power of the various stars had become much stronger. But even so, the entire universe was still trembling and shaking. It was so much so that the countless stars in the void were extinguishing at an unimaginable speed, collapsing and dying. In the blink of an eye, the outermost ring of stars that was closest to the edge of the universe, which contained billions of stars, had been completely extinguished. Even with the magic tool, the stars in other locations were still constantly dimming, and they were getting closer and closer to being extinguished. From these changes, it was easy to see just how terrifying the collision of the celestial body was to the universe. When things reached an extreme, they would move in the opposite direction. Great skill seemed clumsy, great wisdom seemed foolish, and great sound had no sound. When the exquisiteness of an attack reached a certain limit, it would instead seem crude and simple. At that moment, the natural backlash from the great Tao was like this. The strength of that power was naturally beyond the imagination of all creatures. As it was produced by the great Tao, the various truths and mysteries contained within it were naturally imaginable. However, the attack that was produced by such a mysterious and exquisite power was like a celestial body crashing into it. There was not a single trace of technique involved, nor were there any ingenious changes. It was as if it could be easily dodged. However, this was only an illusion. The attack seemed crude and simple, but the exquisiteness and profoundness contained within it were so profound that even Luo Fan could not completely comprehend it. He only knew that no matter where he fled to, even if he traveled through time and space to return to the past or the future billions of years later, he would not be able to escape this wave of attack. Whether he fled to the depths of the universe or another grotto heaven, he would not be able to escape this attack. This was something he was completely certain of the moment the terrifying aura began to condense. As such, although the attack seemed crude and simple, Luo Fan could not avoid it at all. He could only face it head-on and fuse his own power with the magic tool that he had refined over the past 3 years to face this power head-on. Luo Fan's universe contained boundless mysteries. If it was allowed to grow in the future, it could even grow into a major 1,000 worlds that were only slightly inferior to Earth's universe. It could even give birth to countless powerful cultivators that shook the heavens and the earth. It was obvious how high its essence was. Although the power was born from the great Tao and possessed unbelievable might, it was not the great Tao after all. Its essence was only the power of an innate zenith heaven cultivator. No matter how powerful it was, it could not be at the level of a saint. This kind of restriction made it so that although this power had an overwhelming might towards Luo Fan, it wasn't absolutely invincible. It wasn't a power that Luo Fan couldn't resist or deal with. As a result, although the universe that Luo Fan had created with the help of the magic tool shook under the impact of the power, the celestial body underwent various changes from the collision. Countless fragments continuously fell off the surface of the celestial body and turned into powder from the collision. In the end, they disappeared and returned to the great Tao. The celestial body looked like a celestial body, but in reality, it was just something formed from a wave of power. Its essence was a condensed body of laws that was like black jade. The fragments that fell off were threads of laws that were constantly being knocked away and left the black jade. What appeared was that there were billions of threads flickering on the surface of the celestial body. Every single thread was so profound, like marks of a Tao. As they streaked across the surface of the celestial body, they revealed endless, indescribable profundities. These threads were formed when the fragments left the celestial body. It could be said that they were engraved on the celestial body during the collision. The creation of each thread caused the celestial body to tremble strangely. This kind of tremble was different from the tremble caused by the collision. This kind of vibration was extremely mysterious. It directly passed through the infinite distance and was transmitted to the magic tool that was floating in front of Luo Fan, which was like a connate, seamless golden core. Threads naturally appeared on the magic tool, adding a series of faintly discernible, illusory, and real strange patterns to the magic tool. Each of these patterns could be found in the threads that appeared on the celestial body. Even though there were some changes, they did not go beyond the essence and were still the same threads. The appearance of these patterns caused the magic tool's essence to undergo some kind of strange change without anyone noticing. This change seemed to be the magic tool undergoing some kind of crucial transformation, as if it was undergoing some kind of indescribable evolution. There seemed to be some kind of mysterious existence brewing inside it that could be born at any time and cause this magic tool to undergo a shocking change. At this moment, Luo Fan was wholeheartedly using this magic tool. Every change in this magic tool could not escape his senses. The moment these patterns appeared, he had sensed them, and the moment these patterns appeared, he had sensed the changes to the magic tool. The moment the magic tool changed, he couldn't help but show an inexplicable joy on his face. If other cultivators on Earth had sensed the changes in this magic tool, they might not have been able to understand what these changes were. However, Luo Fan immediately understood why these changes occurred and what kind of effects they would have. This change was clearly the magic tool's essence slowly improving. This magic tool was transforming into a true magic treasure. What was brewing inside the magic tool was a treasure spirit of a magic treasure. As long as that spirit was born, this magic tool would no longer be a magic tool. Instead, it would become a true magic treasure, and its power would instantly increase by tens of thousands of times. How could he not be happy about this? The reason for this change and opportunity was because the patterns on the celestial body were produced by the collision between the celestial body and the celestial body. Even though this phenomenon was due to the boundless mysteries contained within the celestial body itself, it was born because of the collision. Since it was a collision, there was a mutual effect. The patterns that appeared on the celestial body, through the influence of a more fundamental law, naturally acted on the other body that collided with the celestial body's universe. The universe itself was completely one with the magic tool, so it naturally appeared on the magic tool. The reason behind this was extremely mysterious and wonderful. It could be said that it was a coincidence, but it could also be said that everything had a chance of survival. As for how to understand this, it was up to the benevolent, to the wise to see. After obtaining this benefit, Luo Fan's confidence became even stronger. As a result, his will became even more tenacious, and his potential, which had already been squeezed to the limit, grew once again. In addition, the power of the magic tool became even more powerful because of the countless patterns, causing the barrier outside of the 1-acre universe to become even more solid. Although the barrier didn't completely block the celestial body, it also slowed down the growth of the vibrations caused by the celestial body's collision. This caused the countless waves of spiritual awareness to be unable to affect the barrier, causing the speed at which the barrier was breaking to slow down a lot. The celestial body was unimaginably strong. Although it was being blocked, it still continued to move down at a slow speed, continuously crushing the barrier. The barrier slowly caved in, causing layers of wrinkles to appear on the surface. It was as if it could be crushed at any time and collapse at any time. The stars and the void within the universe became more and more intense, but as the magic tool strengthened, the extent of the increase became smaller and smaller. This process continued, and in the blink of an eye, several hours had passed. After several hours, the consciousness of the universe was like a thin piece of paper stuck to the surface of the celestial body. However, the universe barrier had unknowingly been crushed into a huge arc-shaped pit, sticking to the other side of the universe. This universe was only the size of an acre, while the celestial body was tens of thousands of miles in diameter. Comparing the two, it was like comparing a spherical sesame to a basketball. One could imagine how terrifying the crushing strength of such a difference was. Under such circumstances, it took several hours to crush the celestial body. No matter how strong the universe barrier was, to be crushed to such an extent, it could be said that the toughness of the universe barrier was astonishing. However, the universe was not a sesame seed or a ball. Although the outer layer of the barrier had been crushed to such an extent that it was almost touching the bottom, the void within the universe still existed. Although it was extremely distorted, and the positions of the stars that still existed seemed to have been stretched, flattened, and rearranged, they still existed. They did not disappear because the barrier of the universe had been crushed into thin pieces. The changes in these few hours were not completely beneficial to the celestial body. During these few hours of collision and crushing, the celestial body had shrunk a lot, and the threads and traces that appeared on its surface were even denser. It was as if every inch of the surface of the celestial body had been plowed, causing the surface of the celestial body to become almost identical to before. It was like a completely unfamiliar celestial body. With such a large number of traces appearing on the surface of the celestial body, the magic tool that was connected to the celestial body through some special method naturally underwent earth-shattering changes. At this moment, the magical artifact that looked like a connate leakless golden core had completely changed its appearance. Countless vein patterns appeared on both the core and the surface of the magic tool, making it seem as if the magic tool had been constructed from countless vein patterns. The glittering golden magic tool became transparent again during this process. The golden light seemed to have completely condensed into one of the vein patterns. Even the boundless golden light from the artifact, which connected every inch of the void and every star in the universe, seemed to be emitted from these patterns. Moreover, at this moment, the changes brewing inside the magic tool had also reached its peak, as if it was only a small touch away from breaking through its limits. Chapter 670, Treasure Transformation. Chapter 631. Final break. Right at this moment, Luo Fan's heart suddenly stirred. With a single thought, his extraordinary will suddenly shook, and suddenly turned into a line that rushed towards the ritual tool. In an instant, it entered the ritual tool. As these powerful wills surged in, the magic tool suddenly trembled. In an instant, it broke through some mysterious and indescribable limit. The veined patterns that had appeared inside and outside the magic tool over the past few hours instantly connected together. As the will circulated, it began to shine with an indescribable light. This light was so mysterious that it seemed to illuminate the void of the universe several light years away in an instant. Within this space of a few light years, there were stars, planets, meteorite belts, satellites, and even planets that created the state of chaos within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles. However, no matter what kind of existence it was unable to obstruct this light at all. Under this light, distance seemed to no longer exist. This distance of several light years was something that even light would need several years to cover. However, it only took an instant for it to be illuminated by this mysterious and incredible light. Even though this light was so mysterious, it was faintly discernible. Where there was light, it was easily suppressed by other light. As long as any creature didn't look carefully, they would overlook it. Even in the boundless void where there was no light, it seemed extremely weak, and it was extremely easy to overlook. However, as long as there were living beings that did not overlook this light, they would discover just how vast and mysterious this light was. The light was filled with world-shaking, limitless vitality. If someone with extraordinary talent could comprehend one or two of the mysteries within, they would be able to embark on the path of cultivation and cultivate great divine powers. Unfortunately, even though the light covered an area that was several light years wide, it was still too small compared to the scale of the entire universe. Within these several light years, there was only one star system, and within this star system, there was only the planet where Luo Fan's consciousness clone resided. There was an extremely simple, primeval life form existing, but it was impossible for it to comprehend the mysteries within this light, let alone comprehend any profound techniques from it. Therefore, even though this light was mysterious, it was only the same as ordinary light in this universe. Apart from the area it covered, and the speed it covered was unimaginably fast. Amidst this light, the countless patterns within the magic tool turned from illusion to reality. They directly turned into real and strange existences, and began to appear inside and outside the magic tool. This change caused the void around the magic tool to be filled with countless lines. These lines were so mysterious and so tenacious, as if they were formed by the condensation of countless purest forces through some indescribable change. It was as if even the destruction of the universe could not destroy them. After these lines appeared, they suddenly shrank and instantly shrunk into the magic tool, wrapping up the endless starry light within the magic tool. Even the golden light that the magic tool emitted to the outside world, which froze the entire void of the universe and mobilized all the forces within the void of the universe to form a universe barrier outside the universe, was also retracted during this process. The golden light drilled into the magic tool again and continued to penetrate deeper into the magic tool. Finally, it reached a mysterious void in the depths of the magic tool. When these lines and the light entered that mysterious void, everything had shrunk into an extremely tiny, faintly discernible. At the same time, the super strong willpower that Luo Fan had poured into the magic tool was like a meteorite falling from the ninth heaven, crashing into the void with a loud bang, directly colliding with the faintly discernible tiny dot. A loud cracking sound rang out. This small dot suddenly exploded under the impact of the super strong willpower. This explosion borrowed the light that had spread out for several light years, and in an instant, it scattered all the light, causing the originally mysterious light to scatter into specks of starry light. Finally, it merged with the magic tool, causing the entire magic tool to instantly change shape. As the small dot exploded, it was as if it had appeared out of nowhere. An indescribably mysterious existence slowly walked out from the void, becoming more and more obvious and larger. In the end, it broke through the void in the depths of the enchanted artifact and fused with it, causing the entire enchanted artifact to instantly change its form. This caused the magic tool to also transform into the appearance of that existence, or rather, into the body of that existence. That existence was none other than a humanoid creature that looked like a child. At this moment, the magical artifact had already transformed into a boy who looked about 6 or 7 years old. His entire body was shining with a bright light, and his face was crystal clear. He had a pure and adorable appearance, and he was chubby. This child was none other than the treasure spirit that had just been born in this magic tool. And the birth of a treasure spirit in this magic tool meant that this magic tool had truly successfully transformed into a magic tool with unlimited power. After this child appeared, there was an incomparably joyous smile on his face. With a tremble, he naturally dispersed, turning into an invisible light barrier that directly enveloped Luo Fan. And at this moment, because the power of the barrier of the universe had already been separated from the magic tool during the transformation process, the entire barrier had already become many times weaker. Under the crushing of the celestial body, it instantly collapsed. And with the collapse of the barrier of the universe, the celestial body, the spiritual state caused by the celestial body, and the impact waves that were produced by the collision earlier, all broke through the barrier in an instant, all surging into this universe. If the celestial body was only an ordinary celestial body, then even if it had a diameter of tens of thousands of miles, it would naturally be restricted by the laws of this universe. It would naturally be turned into an extremely tiny becoming an ordinary celestial body in this universe. Instead, the distance between it and Luo Fan would increase by countless folds. But it was clear that although the celestial body looked like a celestial body, it was only the appearance of the backlash from the great Tao. In essence, it was still the same force, a powerful force that could instantly shatter the space within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles with just the terrifying aura it emitted, turning it into a chaotic state. Such a power could not even be restrained by the laws of Earth's universe. How could it possibly be restrained by this magic tool that was only the size of an acre? Hence, when the celestial body squeezed through the barrier of the universe and entered this universe, the entire universe trembled violently. Billions of tiny stars completely collapsed in an instant, and the void of this universe was also instantly turned into a chaotic state. The chaotic state interweaved with the spiritual state from the outside world, instantly plunging this universe into a state of great destruction. And the impact waves that were produced by the collision were like tigers entering a flock of sheep, blotting out the sky and covering the earth as they wreaked havoc in this state of great destruction. In an instant, they drowned the entire universe. The moment the magic tool underwent a change and gave birth to a treasure spirit, it transformed into the boy, and the 1-acre universe was completely destroyed. In the entire universe, only the area of 30 feet around Luo Fan's body was barely able to expel the surrounding spiritual state due to the existence of a flawless existence, and still remained intact. But it was only temporary. The speed of the celestial body was not the slightest bit slower than the spiritual state. It was about to crush over and directly break through the obstruction of the flawless existence and crush Luo Fan into smithereens. It was at this critical moment that the child transformed into a light barrier. When he transformed into a light barrier and enveloped Luo Fan, the celestial body had already crushed over and directly crushed the light barrier. The light barrier trembled violently, but did not immediately collapse. Instead, a crisp and joyful laughter was emitted from within. Amidst the laughter, the light barrier began to change shape. In an instant, it transformed into a fine line that was 10 feet long, but the size of a speck of dust. Endless lines that were similar to the lines on the surface of the celestial body emerged, but possessed a different kind of profoundness. They interweaved with the lines on the surface of the celestial body, and in an instant, the celestial body was split open, and a fine crack that any living creature could ignore appeared on the surface of the celestial body. It directly drilled into the celestial body and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye, as though it had never existed. Along with the disappearance of the celestial body, Luo Fan, who was within the light barrier, was naturally included. At this moment, all of Luo Fan's willpower was connected to the magic treasure, and all changes of the magic treasure were under his control. Although the treasure spirit had complete intelligence and a rather complete spiritual consciousness, it did not have self-awareness. The way Luo Fan's willpower was connected to it was through some indescribable and mysterious method, replacing its non-existent self-awareness. Therefore, it could be said that this magic treasure could be said to be Luo Fan, but Luo Fan was not this magic treasure. The mysteries of this were subtle and difficult to fathom. At this moment, within the thin line formed by the light barrier, there was a void with a radius of several zhang. This void was not vast, but the strength of the void was extremely shocking. The time within it was also extremely stable. This void was tens of thousands of times more stable than the void outside the Earth's universe. And the degree of time stability was also at least tens of thousands of times more stable than the outside world. A magic treasure could casually open up a boundless void. Even if it was not a natural magic treasure and could not open up a world, it could still form a vast, incomplete world. At this moment, this magic treasure was using this power to maintain the void within a radius of several zhang. The stability of the void and the degree of space-time stability could reach such a level was extremely natural. At this moment, the endless lines outside the light barrier were constantly being emitted from the light barrier, constantly interweaving with the lines inside the surrounding celestial body, constantly moving and constantly combining. In this process of weaving, moving, and combining, the thin line continued to penetrate into the celestial body, like a swimming dragon, meandering and quickly moving towards the central core of the celestial body. The celestial body itself was the materialization of a force. Its source was a mass of law threads interwoven into a solid ink, and its central core was the core of the endless law threads. As the thread continued to penetrate deeper, the natural and terrifying aura of the celestial body also continued to rise, shrink, and gradually converge. It completely separated from the outside world and entered the celestial body, constantly chasing after the thin line. At the same time, along with the terrifying aura, there was also an infinitely powerful, shrinking and crushing force. Following this change, the spiritual state outside the celestial body lost its source of power and gradually calmed down. As for the impact waves that appeared due to the collision, although they wanted to dive into the celestial body to continue chasing after Luo Fan, the nature of the impact wave itself caused them to be completely annihilated the moment they collided with the celestial body. There was not a single impact wave that could rush into the celestial body. Just like this, in just a few dozen breaths, all of the impact waves had been completely annihilated. At this moment, the spiritual state around the celestial body had calmed down a little, and the time within a radius of a few 100 million miles had returned to order. As time returned to order, space, and various kinds of energy, just like that, dozens of breaths passed. Although the area within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles was still grayish, as if it was in a state of chaos, it was like a gray fog. The chaotic aura and spiritual aura that it emitted had already weakened to the point where it was almost non-existent. Although this change was incomparably huge, it was not difficult to understand. After all, the spiritual state itself was formed due to the terrifying aura emitted by the celestial body. At this moment, all of the terrifying aura had converged into the celestial body, and its influence on the outside world had completely disappeared. The spiritual state naturally lost its source of formation, and under the influence of the laws of the universe, it would naturally slowly return to order. After this change, the celestial body had become ordinary, like an ordinary celestial body that appeared in a gray fog. Apart from the countless patterns on its surface, there was nothing extraordinary about it. As for the gray fog, it was also gradually disappearing with the passage of time. According to the speed of its disappearance, it would only take a few days for it to completely disappear, and the celestial body would appear without any concealment. At that time, The celestial body would probably look like a meteorite that had separated from the meteorite belt beside it. Of course, this situation was under the premise that the celestial body would still exist after a few days. The changes in the outside world were no longer of any significance to Luo Fan at this moment. All of his attention was entangled with the power of the celestial body. The crushing power of the celestial body was unimaginably powerful. If it appeared in the outside world, time and space would collapse due to this crushing power, and there was even a slight possibility of returning to the chaos. With such a power completely placed on one's body, it was naturally a rather uncomfortable feeling. Fortunately, after this magic weapon became a magic treasure, its power had greatly increased. The space-time of the void it opened up was far more stable than the outside world by tens of thousands of times. Although the crushing power was powerful, after layers of weakening in the outside world, it could no longer cause the space-time of this void to collapse. Naturally, it could not affect Luo Fan's body at the center of the space-time. The thing that greatly weakened the crushing power was none other than the countless patterns that appeared around the crushing power at all times. These patterns appeared at the same time as the patterns on the surface of the celestial body. Every pattern corresponded to the patterns on the surface of the celestial body, and they had the same profundity. Although the patterns on the surface of the celestial body were formed from the debris produced by the collision, they were essentially formed from the natural manifestation of the Grand Tao. They were already close to Tao marks, and their profundities could be imagined. In this way, the power of the patterns around the fine lines could be imagined. When they interweaved with the surrounding celestial body, they directly obtained a part of the power of the celestial body. Using this power to resist the crushing power of the celestial body, the effect was naturally quite shocking. Almost 99% of the crushing power was offset in this situation. 99% of the power was offset. Although the remaining crushing power was still earth-shattering, the impact on this magical tool was already within the range that it could bear. Naturally, it was impossible for it to hurt Luo Fan. In this way, Luo Fan drove this magic treasure deeper into the celestial body, and his speed was definitely not slow. A celestial body with a diameter of tens of thousands of kilometers was incomparably small in the universe, but for Luo Fan, it was quite huge. Even though the fine line was advancing at a relatively fast speed, it still took several hours to finally drill into the core of the celestial body. The moment the fine line drilled into the core, the entire celestial body shook violently. In an instant, it froze in the void. Then, the celestial body collapsed layer by layer from the outer ear. Countless fragments constantly left the celestial body, but they did not scatter in all directions. Instead, they arranged themselves in the surrounding void and integrated into the surrounding gray mist. In the process of its collapse, strands of extremely complicated patterns constantly formed on the surface of the celestial body. The moment they formed, they completely disappeared, as if they had been absorbed into the celestial body. As the celestial body collapsed more and more, these patterns appeared more and more. In the end, after several dozen breaths, the entire celestial body had collapsed until only a sphere with a diameter of 3 meters was left. This sphere seemed to be constructed from the accumulation of patterns, the densely packed patterns completely concealing the material of the sphere itself. Such an image was already close to what Luo Fan had previously seen with his extraordinary perspective after his 5 cheese unifications. The essence of the celestial body was a sphere of laws. Strength is strength. Even if it is born of the great Tao, it is only a form of strength. A leisurely sigh suddenly sounded from within the sphere. Following this leisurely sigh, boundless golden light suddenly erupted from the center of the sphere, directly passing through the patterns that seemed to have no gaps at all, and illuminating an area of several 100 million kilometers. This golden light was so dazzling that it directly tore through the thick gray mist and illuminated the void of the universe. At this moment, this solar system seemed to have 2 stars. After this golden light, the entire sphere that seemed to be completely composed of patterns instantly shrank and was finally completely replaced by a tiny, thumb-sized light shield. This process, with one look, showed that the entire sphere had been completely devoured by the light shield. Chapter 632. Seeking the Great Tao. Chapter 672. Seeking the Great Tao Tai was extremely mysterious. The moment it appeared, it naturally emitted an indescribably mysterious aura that shook the universe and the void. In an instant, the gray mist that shrouded a radius of hundreds of millions of kilometers disappeared without a trace. Only the existence that emitted the aura of Tai appeared in the void, as if it had existed for eternity. Then, a leisurely long chant came from that location. All the strange phenomena instantly disappeared, and the figure of a boy replaced all of them, appearing in the void above that location. The boy's body shone with golden light, and he looked extremely adorable. He had grown 5 or 6 years older than before, growing from 5 to 12 years old to about 11 or 12 years old. After the boy appeared, his body trembled, and another figure walked out of his body. It was Luo Fan. However, Luo Fan's eyes were slightly dazed at that moment, and there seemed to be endless brilliance and endless profound mysteries flashing in them. After Luo Fan walked out, the boy turned around and turned into a faintly discernible spherical shadow. With a tremble, he rushed into the mud pill palace between Luo Fan's brows and disappeared into his body. Luo Fan, however, did not care about any of this, nor did he react at all. He merely sat cross-legged in the void, and the 5 halos behind his head began to spin rapidly, alternating and changing, while the 3 flowers among them rose and fell at an unimaginable speed. Following that, an invisible hole seemed to be torn open in the void. The appearance of this hole seemed to be completely independent of the Earth's universe. It did not affect the surrounding void at all, nor did it affect the surrounding origin chi or matter at all. Even the light emitted by the stars of this galaxy could not affect this hole. Behind the cave seemed to be a supreme existence that all cultivators and all living beings in the universe yearned for. Just a trace of its aura was sufficient to shake the universe and space itself, and it would allow all living beings to grow and improve beyond imagination. It was even to the extent that they might be able to obtain indescribable transcendence because of it. Yet the aura was so mysterious. It did not dissipate at all, but instead gathered in one place and constantly poured into the 5 halos behind Luo Fan's head, causing them to gradually undergo some kind of inexplicable change. This change did not cause the 5 halos to undergo some kind of inconceivable transformation. Instead, it caused the 5 halos to gradually interweave and merge together. The separation between the 5 halos became increasingly weak and blurry during this process. In the end, when the cave was completely opened, the 5 halos had almost merged into one. If one did not possess astonishing observation skills, it would be extremely difficult to tell that it was originally 5 halos. And the 3 flowers inside the halos were constantly undergoing some kind of inexplicable change during the process. This change caused the connection between the 3 flowers and the halos to become closer and closer. Just like the 5 halos, the boundary between them became more and more blurry, and the difference between them became smaller and smaller, dozens of breaths later. A sparkling and translucent crystal river, which seemed to be composed of countless crystals that were millions of times tougher than diamonds, suddenly rushed out from the top of Luo Fan's head and went straight to the back of his head. It poured straight into the 5 halos, wrapped around the 3 flowers, and broke through the barrier of the halos. With a turn, it rose up from behind the halos and went straight into the mysterious black hole above. At this moment, the crystal river was being strangled by a boundless power the moment it rushed into the cave. It was trying to completely wipe out the crystal river that had entered the cave. However, every single one of the countless crystals on the crystal river was so sturdy and perfect, no matter how the world-shaking power that could shred any living being to pieces tried to kill them, they were not damaged in the slightest. Instead, they became even more crystal clear during the process. The aura that they gave off, which seemed to be indestructible and unscathed, became more and more obvious. Every single crystal became even more crystal clear, and they continued to rush into the cave. Under the endless stream of crystal, the halos behind Luo Fan's head suddenly trembled and left the back of his head. Together with the crystal river, it flowed along the crystal river, and, as if it was being carried, it also rushed into the cave. The moment the 5 halos entered the cave, Luo Fan's body suddenly trembled. The blankness in his eyes became even more shocking, and he had even broken through a certain limit in an instant. Instead, he seemed to be shining brilliantly, as if his mind was extremely focused. All living beings that were enveloped by his eyes would feel as if his eyes had seen through all secrets in an instant. Even Yin Kong, who had not broken through back then, would not be an exception. However, this was only because things would move in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme. In reality, at that moment, there were countless thoughts, information, principles, and mysteries in Luo Fan's mind. They flowed and fused madly. All of this made him lose all sense of the outside world a long time ago. Even though his eyes were still open, it was only because he had completely lost control over his body. If he could control his body and his eyelids, he would have closed his eyes a long time ago. Those thoughts, information, principles, and mysteries were extremely unfamiliar to Luo Fan, but he knew where they came from. All of this was transmitted from the cave behind him through the 5 halos behind his head. The cave was none other than a passageway that led to the Great Tao. The countless thoughts, information, principles, and mysteries that flowed out of the cave were what he had obtained from the Great Tao. If he had survived that tribulation and resisted the crushing and obliterating force of that power, then it would have been absolutely impossible for this cave to appear. No matter how strong Luo Fan's will was, and no matter how much his cultivation had improved, it would be the same, because that power would directly seal the cave. No matter what existence it was, as long as it wanted to peep into the cave, it would be crushed and obliterated by that power. But it was different now. At this moment, Luo Fan had not only survived the annihilation of that tribulation, but during the last wave of counterattack, he had used the magic treasure he had refined to directly devour and fuse the essence of that power, allowing that treasure of the immortal path that had just become a magic treasure to break through its limit and become a primordial unity treasure. An incredible realm that would have taken tens of thousands of years of incessant refining. Under such circumstances, because the magic treasure had fused with the power that guarded the cave, it naturally had some kind of inexplicable affinity with the cave, allowing it to naturally appear above Luo Fan's head. Or perhaps, from another perspective, it was because the disappearance of that power caused a slight gap to appear between the Grand Tao and the magic treasure, and it naturally formed a passageway that allowed the cave to appear. The two seemed to be different, yet they were the same in essence. At this moment, all of Luo Fan's thoughts were placed within the countless thoughts, information, principles, and profundities that surged ceaselessly into his mind, and he was ceaselessly searching for the profundities of the all-heaven immortal realm that he required. This process was simply extravagant to the point all the cultivators that were aware of it wished for nothing more than to directly crush and obliterate Luo Fan. If other cultivators wanted to comprehend even the simplest and crudest profundities of the Grand Tao, they would have to exhaust boundless energy and spend countless years in order to obtain a slight comprehension. At this moment, Luo Fan seemed like he was buying cabbages on the side of the road, and he was picking and choosing the various principles and profundities that they had to exhaust boundless effort to comprehend, and was disdainful of them. How could this make the other cultivators feel at ease? However, if Luo Fan knew what they were thinking, he would probably feel even more disdain towards them. Even though he was extravagantly enjoying the qualification to pick and choose the profundities of the Grand Tao, the price he'd paid for this qualification was so great that it exceeded the imagination of ordinary people. He'd ceaselessly endured pain that could instantly kill any ordinary cultivator during those 100,000 years of time, and it was only because of this that he possessed such a formidable will that surpassed his limits. After that, he'd even suffered the obliteration of the energy that could destroy the universe, and he'd almost perished. If it wasn't for his luck being extremely good, Anizo would have been obliterated by that energy. These experiences that were sufficient to completely obliterate any trace of a cultivator's existence allowed him to possess such a seemingly extravagant qualification at this moment. If they had a choice, then how many cultivators would be willing to exchange all these experiences for this seemingly extravagant qualification at this moment? Amidst this extravagant selection, Luo Fan's cultivation realm started to slowly increase. Even though this sort of increase was so slow, it was only relative to the realm of 3 flowers converged and 5 cheese converged. If this increase in cultivation realm was placed on an ordinary living being, it would definitely be enough for a living being without any cultivation to attain the golden core realm. Such a speed of increase would definitely make all cultivators go mad with envy. However, to Luo Fan, it was still too slow. With a single thought, the will that had already burrowed into the cave and was continuously searching for all sorts of mysteries in the depths of the great Tao suddenly trembled and expanded by several times. The strength and speed of its penetration also increased by several times. Along with this change, the thoughts, information, principles, and profundities that flowed endlessly into Luo Fan's mind and consciousness increased by several times. In practically an instant, it filled Luo Fan's mind and consciousness, causing Luo Fan to feel that his mind and consciousness were so full that there were even signs of it not being effective when he circulated it. However, it was only a slight sign. The endurance of Luo Fan's mind and consciousness was beyond imagination. He did not even need to adjust himself to be able to convert all of this, allowing most of his mind and consciousness to continue accepting the thoughts, information, principles, and profundities that flowed in from the outside world. So that's how it is. So there's still such a mystery. So that's how it can be. Almost at every moment, all sorts of thoughts would suddenly appear in Luo Fan's mind. His knowledge increased with every moment, and the gains he gained at every moment were comparable to what he would gain after several years of dedicated cultivation. This process continued without end. In the blink of an eye, 3 days and 3 nights had passed. During these 3 days and 3 nights, the crystal river that flowed out of the top of Luo Fan's head did not stop at all, nor did it show any signs of stopping. It continued to flow out and flow into the cave above his head. On the other hand, there were countless thoughts, information, principles, and profundities ceaselessly surging into his mind at all times, and they were for him to choose at will. Even though the profundities of the golden immortal realm that he required didn't appear amongst them, the other profundities that were available for him to choose had already allowed his attainments to improve by a few times compared to 3 days ago. It was even to the extent that he felt that his attainments from the Triflower Converge and 5-Chi Unification technique had risen to its peak in this short period of time, and he faintly felt that he might obtain an unimaginable breakthrough at any moment. It was even to the extent that he had the feeling that he didn't have to strive for it in order to comprehend the profundities of the golden immortal realm at any moment and become a golden immortal realm cultivator. Luo Fan did not doubt this feeling at all. It could even be said that even if he hadn't obtained such an enormous improvement in his attainments, he was extremely confident that he didn't have to strive for it in order to comprehend the profundities of the golden immortal realm and become a golden immortal realm cultivator. This was something that had never changed in his heart. However, he was clearly aware that it was absolutely impossible for it to be a short amount of time. No matter how hard he worked, being able to break through this barrier within a few million years was already an extraordinary genius that possessed unimaginable fortuitous encounters. It was precisely because he possessed this extremely clear understanding that he allowed his will to start charging towards the grand Tao after he possessed it. And after he overcame the tribulation, he didn't hold back at all and placed all his will into seeking the Grand Tao. The more he sought the Grand Tao, the more Luo Fan felt the vastness of the Grand Tao, and he sensed how crude the various profundities of the Grand Tao he'd comprehended in the past were. It was even to the extent that he'd faintly made preparations to fight here for a long period of time, and he was prepared to stay here for a few years, or even a few dozen years to search for the profundities of the golden immortal realm. At the instant he made preparations to fight here for a long period of time, his heart suddenly jerked, and he felt as if some sort of indescribable profundity that was extremely closely related to him had entered his mind through the 5 circles of light behind him. At this instant, he understood that the profundity of the golden immortal realm had appeared before he could even locate it. As soon as he understood this, how could Luo Fan still have any hesitation? With a single thought, he directly swept aside all the thoughts, information, principles, and profundities in his mind, and focused all his attention on the wondrous existence that had just entered his mind. In an instant, an indescribable aura of perfection filled his mind, then spread out, filling his mind, filling his mud-pill palace, filling his knowledge sea, filling his entire soul, and filling his entire body. In a trance, boundless light flashed past Luo Fan's eyes. The light flashed so quickly that it was equivalent to 100 billion hours of footage from a movie flashing past his eyes in just an instant. Such speed was unimaginable for ordinary beings, and even ordinary cultivators. In fact, Luo Fan had only been able to barely make out a few fragments of it before. However, for the current Luo Fan, these lights and shadows could not exert any pressure on him at all. No matter how the lights and shadows flickered, no matter how fast they flickered, he could see all the lights and shadows clearly the moment they flashed past. He even had enough thoughts to comprehend the various wonderful scenes described in the lights and shadows. What the light displayed was none other than the various indescribable perfections of perfection. These perfections came in all shapes and sizes. Some were as simple as a circle, while others were so complex that they encompassed the entire earth and the universe, encompassing countless worlds. If these were only fragments, they would naturally be extremely obscure. Only those with unimaginable talent and cultivation would be able to comprehend them. However, at this moment, the light flashed so quickly and densely, and the similarity between them had reached an indescribable level. In a trance, the perfections were no longer concealed and directly poured into the minds of those who saw the light. After a few breaths, Luo Fan came to a sudden realization. So that's how it is. When he came to a sudden realization, the crystal river that had rushed out from the top of his head suddenly trembled and instantly flowed backwards. Moreover, the speed at which it flowed backwards was several hundred times faster than the speed at which it had rushed out. In just a few dozen breaths, the crystal river that had poured into the cave for 3 days and 3 nights had completely flowed backwards, leaving the cave and bringing the circle of light and the 3 flowers back into the top of Luo Fan's head. After the crystal river left, the cave shook slightly and suddenly shrunk. Without any pause, it shrunk into a small dot and disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. At this time, Luo Fan no longer cared about the cave. He sat cross-legged in the void, and his body suddenly shone brightly, revealing endless splendor. This brilliance was extremely gentle, faintly discernible, and faintly discernible. After it appeared, it penetrated deep into the void of the universe, as if it had fused with the void. It illuminated tens of thousands of light years from far away, shrouding the void within this range in this brilliance. An indescribable feeling of perfection was born. Everything within the range of tens of thousands of light years, all energy, and even the void of the universe were tainted and affected by this feeling of perfection. This taint and influence made the matter, energy, and the void seem to come alive. Although there were no abnormal changes, the feeling of being alive was extremely obvious. No living being could ignore it. Following this, strange sounds of the great Tao surged into space within tens of thousands of light years. All sorts of light and shadows that described the perfections that had appeared before Luo Fan's eyes appeared faintly and changed. Chapter 672. Seeking the Great Tao. Seeking the Great Tao. Chapter 672. Chapter 633. Grand Luo. As these changes occurred, Luo Fan slowly stood up and flicked his robes gently, as if he was dusting himself. However, as he did so, the mysterious light, sounds of the ways, and strange lights that blanketed the world and engulfed an area of several 10,000 light years instantly vanished, as if they had never appeared in the first place. In a flash, a sense of perfection, freedom slowly seeped out from Luo Fan's body. As he stood there, he seemed to be the center of the entire universe, the center of the entire world. It was as if the entire world and the entire universe were revolving around him, existing around him. With a slight lift of his hand, the entire star system seemed to tremble slightly. It was as if that small movement of his had shaken the entire star system, causing it to change along with his movement. So this is the Grand Luo. Luo Fan smiled. His eyes shone with a strange light as he calmly said something that was almost identical to what he had said before. However, compared to what he had said before, what he said now was like a definition. It was as if he had only created the Grand Luo now, unlike before when he had only discovered it and guessed it. A strange change instantly spread out, and the entire galaxy underwent some inexplicable change in an instant. The rules of the planets, the way the central star burned, and the way the countless energies that drifted around the star system flowed naturally changed. This change was extremely mysterious, causing the entire galaxy to be filled with an indescribable liveliness in an instant. This life force did not directly give birth to life, but instead formed an environment that was extremely suitable for life. It was as if in that instant, some strange life form could be born in the void of the star system at any time. It was even more so for the planets that had atmospheres to begin with. At that moment, the planets that were originally unsuitable for life were instantly filled with endless life. Although they did not immediately give birth to life, they had reached a certain threshold. With just the slightest change, they would be able to give birth to life forms that were suitable for the planet's environment and completely different from the known life forms. Earth's universe was so vast that the number of planets in it was simply indescribable with numbers. All sorts of strange environments naturally existed. In this case, there was more than one type of environment suitable for the birth of living beings. Just like the various secular studies on Earth before Luo Fan transmigrated, there might also be non-carbon-based life in this universe, such as silicon-based, oxygen-based life, and so on. Based on that, every planet in Earth's universe, and even the stars, could be said to be suitable for the birth of life. It was not just planets like Earth that could give birth to life. Of course, that was in theory, but there was a huge difference between theory and reality. In reality, the chances of a planet giving birth to life were so low that it was impossible in the mundane world. The number of conditions required was enough to make an ordinary person or even an ordinary cultivator collapse. For example, the planet that Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone had refined was already a suitable environment for the birth of certain carbon-based life forms. But if Luo Fan wanted to truly transform it into a planet with carbon-based life forms, he would need to gather vitality through various complicated methods, spend a long time, and expend a huge amount of energy before he could barely create it. Even if he could create it, the life forms that could survive in that environment had to be extremely primitive and had an unimaginably strong ability to adapt to the environment. At that moment, after comprehending the mysteries of the Zenith Heaven, all of this was no longer difficult for Luo Fan. With just a slight thought in his mind, the hundreds of planets in this galaxy, and even the star at the center, naturally underwent a subtle change. The factors that were originally not suitable for the birth of life on these planets and stars were all changed, and the extremely small probability of the birth of life that was practically impossible in his opinion had instantly increased by countless times to the point that it was practically certain. It could be imagined that even if Luo Fan didn't do anything, this galaxy would definitely become a sacred ground for life after a few years, and the hundreds of planets in the star at the center would give birth to at least hundreds of different life forms. Moreover, these hundreds of different life forms weren't the different types of animals and plants on Earth, but the types of carbon-based life forms, silicon-based life forms, and oxygen-based life forms. Making a galaxy undergo such an unbelievable change could be said to be the divine ability of creation and the ability of a saint. Moreover, this was only the result of Luo Fan's small test after becoming a golden immortal realm cultivator. Yes, after a few days of ceaselessly seeking the grand Tao and comprehending the profundities of the zenith heaven, just now, Luo Fan had broken through the realms of condensed chi and spirit converged together, and he'd become a golden immortal realm cultivator. It could be said that at the instant he comprehended the profundities of the zenith heaven, his cultivation had improved by countless times, and at this moment, it was already equivalent to attaining the supreme realm of attaining the golden immortal Tao fruit. The golden immortal realm represented perfection. The profundities of the all-heaven realm were profundities that had attained perfection. When one attained this realm, all divine abilities, techniques, and the might of the martial Tao will be able to attain perfection and transform into the laws of the Tao. With a single thought, one could utilize them at will, and the impossible could become possible. Creation and creation were extremely ordinary. Even though changing the environment of this entire star system was troublesome, it was only a single thought to him. Even though changing the environment of this galaxy with a single thought seemed to be extremely easy, Luo Fan instantly understood the limits of what he could accomplish at this moment. He obtained an extremely clear understanding of the might of the divine abilities he possessed after attaining the golden immortal realm. My luck is truly heaven-defying. I was actually able to survive until now. After he understood the might of the divine abilities he possessed, Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh with emotion. He naturally didn't sigh with emotion because he was able to rely on his extraordinary will to seek the grand Tao and comprehend the profundities of the zenith heaven. And it was instead because he was sighing with emotion when he encountered Yin Kong, who'd attained the Buddha realm. He encountered the spiritual sense that was born from the energy of a golden immortal realm cultivator, encountered the palm of an existence that was obviously a golden immortal realm cultivator at least, yet he was actually able to escape and ascend into the heavens. Moreover, it was even to the extent that he obtained countless benefits that allowed him to directly break through his limits and comprehend the profundities of the zenith heaven to become a golden immortal realm cultivator. The reason he sighed with emotion was because he noticed that even though he'd just attained the golden immortal realm, he was countless times stronger than before. At this moment, facing himself before he'd broken through, he only needed a single thought or a single gaze to turn him who hadn't broken through into a pile of mush before he'd broken through into a pile of mush. His body, Tao, and soul would vanish. Moreover, if he worked hard, he might even be able to trace back to the source and directly attack his main body that was far away in the primordial world. Even though he couldn't kill his main body due to the distance between them being 2 universes apart, it was sufficient to cause his main body to suffer near-fatal injuries. Since he could do it, even if Yin Kong and the others he'd encountered before were slightly weaker, they would definitely be able to easily kill him. Under such circumstances, even though he'd stumbled along the way, he'd still managed to come this far in the end. Moreover, he'd even obtained considerable benefits from them, which directly made him who he was now. It was imaginable how heaven-defying his luck was. How could this not make him sigh with emotion? I didn't expect that there'd actually be a cultivator who could break through his limits and attain the golden immortal realm in this Dharma-ending era. At this moment, a faintly discernible voice suddenly pierced through the boundless void and infinite distance into Luo Fan's ears. When Luo Fan heard this voice, he didn't show any surprise on his face. Even his expression didn't change at all. He only smiled faintly. It's just a coincidence. If it wasn't for my good luck, I wouldn't have been able to obtain the divine ability I have now. Since you're all here, why don't you show yourselves? When he said these words, Luo Fan didn't use any divine ability at all. However, as soon as these words left his mouth, they naturally merged into the void and spread out through the karmic connection. They spread to several locations in the universe on Earth. The distance between each location was unknown as to how many light years away they were from each other. Ha! I didn't expect your senses to be so sharp right after you just broken through. You're actually able to sense us, as expected of someone who could attain the golden immortal realm in the Dharma ending era. At this moment, another voice came into Luo Fan's ears. What a pity! If such a genius could be born in the age of the saints, becoming a saint wouldn't be an illusion. But in this Dharma ending era, he can only wait for death. Another voice joined in. Old bastard, can't you say something nice for once? He's just broken through, and you're already pouring cold water on him. How disappointing. Another voice came into Luo Fan's ears, and it was reprimanding the first voice. It wasn't just one person who was spying on Luo Fan from the side, but there were several of them. Luo Fan wasn't surprised at first. After all, the phenomenon he'd caused when he became a Khanate golden immortal realm covered an area of tens of thousands of light years. Compared to the entire universe, even though Earth was negligible, it could still affect more than half of the galaxy he was in. Such an enormous phenomenon was sufficient to disturb an extremely large area of Earth's universe. So he would absolutely not believe that it hadn't drawn the attention of the Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators that still existed in Earth's universe. It was precisely because of this that he wasn't surprised when someone utilized some sort of strange divine ability to speak into his ears, and he felt it to be a matter of course instead, because it was within his expectations, and he would be surprised instead if no one spoke. But at this moment, these voices were speaking successively, and it was even to the extent that there were signs of more and more people, so he couldn't help but feel surprised. Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators existed in Earth's universe, and this was something that Luo Fan was aware of since a long time ago. It was even to the extent that he'd seen someone break through in the past. However, there were so many Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators in the space of Earth's universe that was disturbed by his breakthrough, and this caused him to be extremely surprised. It's already the Dharma ending era now, so why are there still so many Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators existing? This was the only thought in Luo Fan's mind. At this moment, there were a few more existences that joined the conversation. In total, the number of Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators that spoke to Luo Fan from countless light years away in Earth's universe had increased to an entire 18. On the other hand, the reason these 18 Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators spoke seemed to be merely to greet Luo Fan and announce their existence. Thus, their words didn't contain any substance, and they merely spoke a single sentence before falling silent. After these 18 Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators finished speaking and waited for quite some time, Luo Fan finally said, "I've been wholeheartedly cultivating, and I actually didn't know that there were so many fellow Taoists in the universe. I'm truly delighted. However, I wonder which fellow Taoist made a move against me 100,000 years ago. Will you be able to show yourself and settle the karma?" His words were still transmitted along the karmic connection, and it remained throughout the universe and directly entered into the ears of those 18 Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators. Space froze slightly when they heard Luo Fan's words. After a long time, no words entered into Luo Fan's ears, and it seemed as if these Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators had moved their attention away and weren't willing to talk to Luo Fan any longer. After quite some time, a voice entered into Luo Fan's ears. However, it wasn't one of the 18 Khanate golden immortal realm cultivators that spoke just now, and it was another voice that Luo Fan had never heard before, but its aura was slightly familiar. I never expected that the ant from 100,000 years ago would actually be able to surpass his limits and become a golden immortal realm cultivator today. Since you want to settle the karma with me, then come find me yourself, said the voice. The voice carried an air of supremacy and suppression. It was like a divine king that sat in the nine heavens was talking to an ant that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws at him. This person's aura had been entangled with Luo Fan for 100,000 years, and even now, it was still entangled with Luo Fan's consciousness clone. It was the voice of the person that had slapped Luo Fan. As soon as the voice finished speaking, the planet that Luo Fan's consciousness clone had refined suddenly shook violently. Under the impact of an indescribably powerful force, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the planet. Lava, black mist, baleful aura, and underground fire surged out from the cracks, instantly destroying the ecosystem that had just been established on the planet. The various lives that had just appeared on the planet were instantly wiped out. Luo Fan frowned, and with a thought, the changes on the planet calmed down. The surface of the planet that had collapsed instantly gathered together, and the ecosystem of the entire planet was instantly rebuilt. In fact, it was even more stable and perfect than before. Although the countless living beings that had died previously did not come back to life, it was only a matter of time before they were reborn. I didn't think it through. After doing all that, Luo Fan sighed inwardly. The reason why the planet had changed so suddenly was because that existence had transmitted his will here and discovered the state of the power he had sent out. He knew that his spiritual sense doppelganger was using that power to refine his will and improve himself, so he directly detonated that power. While causing heavy damage to his spiritual sense doppelganger, it also caused great damage to the planet that his spiritual sense doppelganger had refined. Although it did not completely collapse, it would normally take at least hundreds of millions of years for life to be born. Of course, the damage was nothing to Luo Fan, who could change the environment of the entire galaxy with just a thought. He only needed to think about it, and the damage to his spiritual sense doppelganger and the planet itself would disappear in an instant. Even after the destruction, it would become even more perfect. At this moment, the consciousness clone's will was crystal clear, and it was countless times more powerful than before. Although it still could not catch up to his body and could not directly surpass the limits of cultivation like his body, it had reached the peak that was only a step away from surpassing, and its power and abilities were countless times more powerful than before. This was also natural. At this moment, Luo Fan had already become a Khanate Grand Luo, and with a thought, there would be boundless Khanate Grand Luo level energy constantly cleansing his consciousness clone. The effect was naturally many times better than the force from before, and that was why he could achieve this. In just an instant, his consciousness clones had already been improved beyond imagination. It was an almost inconceivable thing. All of these changes occurred in an instant. After that, Luo Fan said, "I'll naturally come back, and I definitely won't make you wait for long." As he spoke, he'd already sensed the location of that person through the karma link, and he'd even seen that person's appearance. When the 3 Chi's converge prominence was completed, Luo Fan already possessed the ability to sense all existences that were related to him through karma link. After the 5 Chi's converge prominence was completed, this ability was greatly improved. Although there was no qualitative change, the range of his senses was over 100 times greater than before. Of course, the range wasn't the range of space, but the range of the karma link. For example, a person could only form a karma link with Luo Fan after passing through several layers of indirect transmission, and these layers of indirect transmission were the range of the karma link. For example, a certain existence would form a karma link with him after a certain number of years, and this number of years would be the range of the karma link. For example, a certain existence could conceal the karma link with him when it was powerful to a certain extent, and the extent of its strength would be the range of the karma link. All of these were the factors that limited the profound senses, and it was the direction that his senses should be improved. After the 5 Chi's converge prominence was completed, even though the range of Luo Fan's senses had increased by 100 times, he still didn't really dare rely on this sort of sense to sense that person. After all, the karma link was mutual, and this sort of sense was mutual as well. To a golden immortal realm cultivator, So long as Luo Fan sensed him, then he would definitely be able to sense Luo Fan as well. Unless Luo Fan exceeded the range of his senses. Thus, if Luo Fan tried to sense that person after he completed the 5 Qis converge prominence technique, then even though he might be able to find out where that person was and what appearance that person had, it would definitely arouse that person's vigilance. At that time, if that person were to launch another palm strike at Luo Fan, then how would Luo Fan endure it? Chapter 634. That person had the appearance of a middle-aged man. He was dressed in a Taoist robe, but his long hair was draped over his shoulders. His eyes were bright, and there seemed to be 2 balls of fire within them. It was as if those eyes were being roasted by these 2 balls of fire. Behind his head was a clump of grayish qi current. This qi current seemed to have substance. Although it was just an aura, it had a mysterious aura that could not be broken or damaged. It was slightly rolling and spiraling behind his head, and an aura of a great perfection realm expert was constantly emitting from it. At this moment, this person was sitting cross-legged on a lotus throne. This lotus throne was placed on a platform that was tens of thousands of feet high. There was an unknown number of steps in front of this platform, directly extending from the flat ground to the front of this lotus throne. And below this platform was a square. There were countless praying mats on the square. At this moment, there were at least tens of thousands of cultivators sitting on these praying mats. There were men and women, old and young, but each of them had extremely vigorous energy within their bodies. The stronger ones had even condensed the 3 flowers of Tao integration, while the weaker ones were close to achieving the golden Dan of innate realm. Above this square, there was a mass of golden radiance that revealed endless light and shadow. It was constantly rolling and surging, and occasionally a sound that seemed like the sound of the great Tao could be heard from the golden radiance that covered the entire square, shaking the entire square and the entire void. There wasn't any scenery around the plaza, but a grayish gray, as though it was shrouded by chaos. It was as though the entire world only had this plaza, this platform, and that clump of golden clouds. If this scene was seen by other cultivators, they might not be able to make sense of it. But with one look, Luo Fan knew that this location was not in the Earth's universe, but in the heaven of a certain location in the Earth's universe. The surroundings were gray and seemed to be shrouded by the existence of spiritual chaos. It was not that there was really nothing, but a world that was hidden by that middle-aged man. Perhaps it was a boundless river, or perhaps it was a boundless ocean, or perhaps there was nothing at all. All these depended on the true appearance of the heaven. With a single thought, Luo Fan had already seen everything clearly. Then he focused all of his attention on the man on the high platform. Obviously, the middle-aged man was the person that attacked Luo Fan 100,000 years ago. Just as Luo Fan had expected, this person was a golden immortal realm cultivator. Moreover, based on the boundless aura he emanated, he was much stronger than ordinary golden immortal realm cultivators. At the very least, those 18 golden immortal realm cultivators who'd paid attention to Luo Fan and greeted Luo Fan were absolutely unable to compare to him. The instant Luo Fan saw the middle-aged man, the flames in the middle-aged man's eyes seemed to reflect Luo Fan's appearance. At the same time, Luo Fan had a feeling that he was looking at the man. Humph! The man grunted coldly, while an extremely disdainful smile appeared on his face. The airflow behind him that emanated the aura of a perfected cultivator shook, and everything that Luo Fan saw shattered and vanished in an instant. Obviously, the middle-aged man was unwilling to be spied on by Luo Fan, and he'd used some sort of technique to conceal himself and the heaven. When the image before his eyes vanished, an inexplicable smile appeared on Luo Fan's face. So he didn't surpass the golden immortal realm. I can rest assured now. Such a thought flashed through his mind. Although the middle-aged man had concealed the heaven at this moment, Luo Fan already knew where the heaven was from the glance he'd taken earlier. It wouldn't be a problem for him to find the heaven now. Looks like the foundation of this Earth's universe is deeper than I imagined. The 18 golden immortal realm cultivators from before might not be all the golden immortal realm cultivators in this area, and they might just be existences on the same level as me. With that thought in mind, Luo Fan took a step forward and arrived on the planet that his spiritual sense clone had refined. For Luo Fan 100,000 years ago, even if it wasn't the best choice to fuse his spiritual sense clone with this planet and have it stay there for a long time, it was definitely not a mistake. However, for the current Luo Fan, it wasn't a wise choice no matter how he looked at it. The spiritual sense, doppelganger, fused with the planet and refined the planet into its body. Although this allowed his spiritual sense doppelganger to control unimaginable power and have unimaginable development prospects, it also limited the spiritual sense doppelganger, making it unable to be as free as the real body. This was naturally not a big deal. In any case, to Luo Fan, as long as his main body could be free, he would be able to accomplish all his goals in coming to this Earth's universe. However, that was only normal. When the middle-aged man discovered that Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone was here, the spiritual sense clone's inability to move freely had become a huge flaw that the middle-aged man could use to deal with Luo Fan. After all, this planet might be a powerful existence that ordinary cultivators couldn't resist. With just a slight movement, they would be reduced to dust, their bodies, Tao, and souls. However, for Golden Immortal Realm cultivators, they only needed to use a little trick or even a thought to make all the energy on this planet disappear and cause the planet to collapse. Normally, he wouldn't be afraid of anything if he didn't attract the attention of a Golden Immortal Realm cultivator. However, now that he had attracted the attention of a Golden Immortal Realm cultivator, it was equivalent to sending himself to the edge of a knife and waiting for the other party's mood to decide when the knife would fall. After some consideration, Luo Fan just decided to enter the core of this planet to solve this flaw. Suddenly, he had a thought and stopped. He raised his head, and his eyes seemed to have passed through the boundless void and the layers of the universe. After a long time, he sighed. With a thought, all his understanding, all his thoughts, and the boundless profound memories he obtained from the Grand Tao went directly through some mysterious and unfathomable method. They passed through the void, time, and universe, and were directly sent to an unknown primordial world outside the Earth's universe. They were directly sent into the mind and thoughts of his main body that was in the primordial world, allowing his main body to instantly obtain all the profound mysteries he had comprehended during the process of becoming a Golden Immortal Realm cultivator. Among them, the profound mysteries of the Golden Immortal Realm occupied the majority. After he finished doing all this, Luo Fan suddenly felt his entire body lighten up, and a feeling as if he'd put down all burdens arose from his heart. The feeling of great freedom and freedom obtained after attaining the innate Golden Immortal Realm had instantly increased by a few times. He even faintly felt that his cultivation realm seemed to have improved slightly. Comprehending the profundities of the Golden Immortal Realm and providing assistance to his main body in seeking the Tao fruit of the Golden Immortal Realm wasn't the goal that his main body had set at the beginning. Instead, it was the goal that he had set after he came to this Earth's universe and discovered that he had a greater chance of comprehending the profundities of the Golden Immortal Realm. It could also be said that it was the goal that he had found for himself after he came to this Earth's universe and solved the goal that his main body had set for him. It was the meaning of his existence in this Earth's universe. Naturally, he had to accomplish this goal. It was also the supreme goal that he wanted to accomplish even if he had to abandon all forms of existence in this Earth's universe. It was precisely because this goal was so important to him that it was practically equivalent to the meaning of his existence that he would work tirelessly and exhaust all his strength to achieve this goal before he achieved it. However, after he achieved his goal, he fell into a faint daze instead. It was even to the extent that he was at a loss and didn't know what he should do next. It was precisely because of this that he didn't transmit the profundities of the Golden Immortal Realm to his main body at the first possible moment after he became a Golden Immortal Realm cultivator. Instead, he seemed to have neglected it and started to become entangled in the various karmic entanglements in this Earth's universe. If he hadn't suddenly realized that he was so fearful of the middle-aged man after he arrived on this planet and realized that he didn't have the confidence to absolutely defeat the middle-aged man, he would have thought clearly that if he didn't transmit his comprehension of the profundities of the golden immortal realm to the middle-aged man before he fought him, then there was a possibility that all his efforts would go to waste, and these comprehensions would vanish along with his defeat to the middle-aged man. That was why he suppressed the slight daze in his heart and directly transmitted these comprehensions to his main body in the primeval world that was 2 universes away through the connection between their souls. After he did all of this, he suddenly realized that he actually didn't feel dazed at all. Instead, it was like he'd put down a heavy burden that pressed down on his heart, and he felt extremely relaxed and at ease. It was this inexplicable feeling that caused his cultivation realm, which had just broken through, to rise again. He felt that his entire soul had become much clearer, and he felt much closer to the Tao of this Earth's universe. I see. In a flash, Luo Fan seemed to have understood something, but he also seemed to have understood nothing. He only felt that his entire body was relaxed. He felt that he was only himself at this moment, that he was finally complete. Of course, this did not mean that this clone of Luo Fan had become independent and had become a completely different individual from Luo Fan's main body. This situation was impossible, because this clone was formed from a single thought of Luo Fan. Even if it grew even more, even if it became a saint, it was only a part of Luo Fan. All of its gains and changes could be said to be the gains of Luo Fan's main body. The changes to his main body naturally couldn't become independent and become another person. In reality, this feeling of being finally complete was more like the legendary 3 corpses. It was oneself and not oneself. It was independent and yet not independent. It was mysterious and wonderful beyond words. If one were to insist on describing it, it would be like a person who occasionally changes that angle of view to observe things from another angle and materializes into an individual. Perhaps the 3 corpses is more mysterious, but it's not the path I want to walk. This is just right. A delighted smile appeared on Luo Fan's face. Although his current state was a little like the 3 corpses, it was ultimately different. The legendary 3 corpses was to sever one's own obsessions, be it good or evil self, heaven or man, yin or yang, or even superego, self, or ego. All sorts of obsessions were severed through some mysterious method, allowing one's body to remain in an incomparably transcendent, clear-headed, clear, and pure state to comprehend, calculate, and cultivate. But the current Luo Fan was different. This clone of his was formed through cultivation, enlightenment, and ascension. It contained all of the main body's obsessions, as well as all of the main body's memories. It could be said that it was fundamentally no different from the main body. This entity formed from the thoughts was similar to the 3 corpses. Although it also had the characteristics of the 3 corpses, it did not have any bias, nor could it bear any obsessions for the main body. Its existence or not had no effect on the main body. Unlike the 3 corpses, which would return to the main body if those obsessions were lost for cultivation, this form of existence was naturally far inferior to the 3 corpses. It could be said to be a method of combat, but not a method to prove one's Tao. For cultivators who wholeheartedly pursued the Tao, it was not very attractive. Because of this, although the 3 corpses technique had appeared, there was no cultivation technique like Luo Fan's clone. Except, although the 3 corpses technique was more profound, more ingenious, and more useful, it was not suitable for Luo Fan. Even if those techniques were placed in front of him, he would absolutely not cultivate them. At most, he would comprehend them and see if there were any profundities that he could corroborate with his own Tao. This was not pretentious, but with Luo Fan's current cultivation realm, his understanding of himself had already reached an inconceivable level. He could definitely cultivate the 3 corpses technique, but the form of existence after the 3 corpses technique was not something he liked, nor could he accept. The 3 corpses technique was to sever some opposing obsessions that affected the clarity of one's mind. whether it was good or evil, self, heaven, earth, and man, yin and yang, being severed by this three corpses technique. Although it did not mean that one would completely lose these emotions, it would transform these emotions into another form of existence. For example, the most common three corpses of good, evil, self, and evil did not mean that after the three corpses technique was severed, the cultivator would no longer have good thoughts, evil thoughts, and no self. But after the three corpses technique was severed, these emotions would no longer become obsessions and would no longer become the principle that one adhered to. After the three corpses technique was severed, an even more transcendent would override these three thoughts and control them with incomparable rationality. As long as the situation required it, as long as the cultivation required it, as long as the calculations required it, these three thoughts could be directly suppressed, as if they did not exist. Under such circumstances, as long as the situation required it, as long as the situation required it, a compassionate and benevolent person could watch the destruction of the heavens and earth and the death of millions of living beings and would not have any psychological disturbance. A person who originally loved and cared for his disciples and was incomparably attached to his relatives could watch the destruction of his disciples and relatives and the disappearance of his body and Tao and would not feel any emotional disturbance. Although they still had compassion and still loved and cared for their disciples and relatives, this state might be an excellent existence for cultivation. It could allow the cultivator to clearly understand the situation and would not act unfavorably because of their own emotions. It could also greatly increase the possibility of them proving their Tao. However, this existence was absolutely unacceptable to Luo Fan. The reason why he could not accept this existence was no different from the reason why he could not accept the Buddhist sex cultivation method. After the three corpses technique, he would no longer be himself. Perhaps it was difficult to put it this way, but if one hypothesized it, one could clearly see it. For example, if two cultivators of the three corpses technique with completely different personalities were placed in the same dangerous situation, their choices would definitely be the same. Even if they had to kill the same person who was incomparably important to them, their choices would definitely be the same. Even after killing the person, they would not feel any remorse, nor would they feel any emotional disturbance. This was because to them, that was the only choice they could make. At this time, Luo Fan was already a Khanate Grand Luo cultivator. For the Earth's universe, this realm had already set foot on the holy road. His next pursuit was to pursue the path of becoming a saint, to pursue immortality, to be impervious to all tribulations, to transcend the heavens and earth, and to transcend time and space. Under such circumstances, he could already preliminarily understand all the mysteries that could be thought of and understand the truth of all the legends. Through the descriptions of the three corpses technique that he had seen in some of the books in the Air Sutra Depository, he understood the mysteries of the three corpses technique and the state after the three corpses technique very clearly. There was no doubt at all, and he naturally knew that the three corpses technique was not an acceptable choice for him. Coming back to his senses from his memories, Luo Fan shook his head. With a thought, he casually pointed a finger. An ray of light followed the connection of karma and penetrated into the endless distance. This ray of light did not contain anything else but the mystery of the five Chi's unification. When he showed up to ask Lier and even borrowed the Air Sutra Depository, he had promised Lier that if possible, he would help him cultivate a few strands of Grand Luo Qi. At this time, he had already become a Khanate Grand Luo cultivator, and the Grand Luo Qi that only contained an extremely small portion of the Grand Luo's mysteries could be easily described to him, unlike before when he could not describe it at all or even simulate it with his mind. No matter how he looked at it, this could be considered to have fulfilled the conditions of the promise, which was why he directly sent the mystery of the five Chi's unification to Lier. After all, fulfilling this promise was as easy as lifting a finger for him. The ray of light transmitted through the connection of karma was not limited by distance at all. As long as one's cultivation realm was high enough, and the power of one's divine ability was high enough, one could instantly arrive in the same universe. Luo Fan's current location was tens of thousands of light years away from Earth, but in an instant, the spiritual light directly traversed the distance of tens of thousands of light years, penetrated the formation formed by 500 billion runes, and directly entered the heavenly realm. It appeared in front of Lier, who was adjusting his breathing with his eyes closed somewhere. Chapter 635. Chapter 675. Refine Lier was originally adjusting his breathing, but when he heard this, he was slightly startled. Then his entire mind was filled with an indescribable joy. His face even showed a stunned expression as he shakily reached out his hand to grab the spiritual light. When the spiritual light entered his hand, he finally let out a long sigh of relief. He felt his entire mind relax, and an unprecedented sense of satisfaction rose from his heart. Then he came back to his senses. With an embarrassed expression, he bowed to the sky and said, "Immortal's kindness, Lier will never forget." However, even though he had spoken, there was no reply. This was for sure. For Luo Fan, delivering this spiritual light was as easy as lifting a finger. Since he had done it, he had done it. Exchanging pleasantries with Lier was not what he was interested in at the moment. Therefore, he didn't add any thoughts to the spiritual light. He could only send out thoughts and not exchange pleasantries with Lier. Lier wasn't surprised by this. After bowing, he put away the spiritual light and stored it in his storage space. In this age of chaos, Lier was able to rely on some fragments of scriptures to cultivate to his current level, and he was also halfway through the 5 Qis unification. One could imagine how extraordinary his aptitude and willpower were. After the sudden impact, just now, he had regained his rationality, but he knew that his state of mind at this moment was not the best for cultivation. If he received this spiritual light at this time, the efficiency would not be too high, and he might even miss many key points because of his unstable state of mind. As such, after he obtained the spirit light, he hid it and began to adjust his state of mind and emotions so that he could be in his best state. Only then could he accept the mysteries contained within the spirit light. The moment Luo Fan's words came from the spiritual light, the various arrangements that Luo Fan had set up in the air scripture pavilion instantly collapsed and disappeared. Everything in the scripture pavilion returned to how it was before Luo Fan came. It was as if Luo Fan had never appeared. When all these changes were completed, Luo Fan, who was on a planet tens of thousands of light years away, was shocked. All the information he had sensed about Lier instantly blurred and then disappeared without a trace. This didn't mean that Luo Fan had dispersed his own perception. Instead, it meant that the karma between Luo Fan and Lier was over. Since the karma was over, his perception of Lier through the karma connection was naturally severed. Of course, as long as Luo Fan was willing, he could still sense Lier through some methods. It wouldn't be too troublesome, but it was no longer necessary. As for how Lier would deal with that spiritual light, whether he would immediately receive it or adjust his state of mind before receiving it, it was meaningless to Luo Fan, and he didn't need to pay attention to it. After doing all this, he let out a long sigh. Looking up, he felt that the sky was clear. The entire world and the entire universe were so lively. After completing all of the goals that his main body had imposed on himself and for his main body, and after settling the karma that he had sown for this goal, Luo Fan's whole body felt relaxed, making him feel that he was truly alive at this moment. This universe is so vast. Maybe I can find some interesting things to do. This thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. After this thought appeared, the smile on Luo Fan's face became more and more relaxed. With a slight thought, he took a step forward. His figure was extremely natural. As if he had crossed a threshold, he directly arrived at the core of this planet. The core of this planet was still the same as before, but the way Luo Fan appeared here was very different from before. In the beginning, he still had to rely on the stainless immaculate to isolate the various magma and energy in the surroundings to appear here. But now, he didn't have to move at all, nor did he have to rely on any energy or stainless immaculate. When he appeared here, the magma and energy in the surroundings surrounded him like air, yet they didn't affect him at all. It was as if he was standing on flat ground, and the surroundings were no different from the air. The situation was so natural that it even made others feel that it should be like this. The energy that could burn and flatten everything was just air, an illusion, and it didn't seem destructive at all. This natural change was naturally caused by the natural changes that occurred in Luo Fan's body after he became a golden immortal realm cultivator. In fact, any golden immortal realm cultivator possessed such a characteristic. After a cultivator became a golden immortal realm cultivator, the essence of their vitality would be improved to an indescribable extreme. No matter if it was their body, soul, thoughts, or will, all of them possessed the characteristics of perfection. This sort of characteristic naturally didn't represent that the body, soul, thoughts, and will had truly attained a state of perfection that couldn't be improved any further. In fact, this sort of perfection was only relative perfection. In other words, this sort of perfection was only at a level that could be described with the word great. Further levels of cultivation was to ceaselessly expand the great of perfection, and in the end, it encompassed the grand Tao, the universe and the heavens and the earth. At that time, one would be an invincible, omnipotent, and undying saint. Even though the original version was only a relatively complete version, it already possessed all sorts of inconceivable qualities. For example, the ability to adapt to the environment in the outside world was one of them. The adaptability of any golden immortal realm cultivator was unimaginably formidable. No matter how adverse the environment was, so long as it didn't exceed the universe, then it wasn't a threat to a golden immortal realm cultivator at all. So long as a golden immortal realm cultivator entered such an adverse environment, then his body, soul, thoughts, and would naturally be adjusted, and they would naturally adapt to this sort of environment, causing this environment that was sufficient to annihilate all living beings to become comfortable and wonderful like the skies on earth, of course. The adverse level of the environment would naturally affect the speed of adjustment. For example, the adverse environment at the core of this star practically didn't require any time for a golden immortal realm cultivator, and they would be able to adapt to it as soon as they stepped foot into it. On the other hand, if it was a black hole where space and time were warped, then perhaps it would require a few hours to completely adapt to it. Luo Fan, who'd just broken through, was naturally rather unfamiliar towards the various profound characteristics of his body. However, he'd already attained this level of cultivation after all, so he only had to grasp the clues to comprehend any divine ability he possessed, and he would naturally be able to comprehend it with ease. After he'd adapted to the surrounding magma and energy, he'd completely grasped these characteristics of his body. After he grasped all of this, Luo Fan had a deeper understanding of how formidable a golden immortal realm cultivator was. At the same time, he sighed with admiration toward his luck before he'd broken through. With a slight thought in his mind, a figure gradually appeared before him. This figure was completely constructed from tiny particles that were like specks of dust, yet every single one of them was crystalline and translucent. Based on its appearance, it was exactly Luo Fan's appearance. Obviously, this was the condensed form of the will of Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone. Since it was him, Luo Fan naturally didn't have to discuss anything with this spiritual sense clone, and it was even to the extent that he didn't have to show any expression. He casually pointed with a finger, and the condensed form of the spiritual sense clone shook abruptly before growing explosively at an unimaginable speed. In the blink of an eye, it had grown explosively from its original height of 3 to 30 kilometers tall, and it had grown by over 10,000 times. Luo Fan's own will had already surpassed its limits, and it had even attained the state of being able to charge into the Grand Tao and directly obtain the various profundities of the Grand Tao. Before he'd attained the Golden Immortal Realm, it was merely a will. Even though it was formidable, he was unable to utilize it perfectly, and he could only rely on it in a crude and simple manner. But at this moment, it was different. At this moment, Luo Fan had already attained the golden immortal realm. So even though this was still comparatively formidable to him, it was already within the scope of his complete control. Moreover, with the practically omnipotent ability of a golden immortal realm cultivator to control this unimaginably formidable will, the might it was able to display was obvious. Instantly strengthening the will of his spiritual sense clone by 10,000 times naturally wasn't difficult at all. When it expanded to around 30 kilometers in height, the body that was condensed from the will suddenly erupted with an aura that was indestructible. The aura of complete control over all matter, energy, and even time and space in the surroundings had increased to the point it couldn't be suppressed anymore. In an instant, the entire planet was under the control of the will formed from the will. It seemed as if the entire planet had suddenly disintegrated, and only a strand of strange energy remained to prevent it from collapsing and maintaining its original appearance. Along with this change, Luo Fan raised his hand and grabbed once more. The core of the planet rumbled before it instantly exploded into pieces and transformed into a ball of strange mist. The mist was so miraculous. Even though it was in the form of mist, it was unimaginably heavy. The force of attraction it emanated wasn't any different from before, and it was even to the extent that it seemed to cover a wider area, because it had spread out, causing it to seem even larger instead. The sudden disintegration of the core should have been a calamity that could cause the entire planet to collapse. However, at this moment, the entire planet was under the control of the will. What maintained the stability of the planet wasn't the core of the planet, but the power controlled by the body formed from the will. As a result, the sudden disintegration of the core didn't affect the stability of the entire planet at all. The planet was still absolutely intact like before, and it seemed as if nothing had changed at all. The mist formed from the explosion of the core shook before it suddenly charged upwards. It transformed into a river that charged into the body formed from the will above. The body formed from the will was 30 kilometers tall. Even though the mist formed from the explosion of the core was extremely heavy and huge, it was nothing to the body formed from the will. It entered the body without holding back at all, and it started to undergo some sort of extremely subtle and profound changes. It seemed like an unbelievable existence was brewing within it. Luo Fan's eyes lit up as he waved his hand gently. The laws that made up the entire universe were casually plucked by him like strings of a zither. The various laws that ordinary cultivators would not be able to obtain even if they tried to pry into them at all continuously revolved and twisted. They continuously fused with the various laws and underwent all sorts of unbelievable changes. The changes did not occur anywhere else but in the body formed from the will. Along with this change, the will on the body of will began to change its arrangement. Strange lines began to appear on the body of will. The patterns were complicated and profound. Every single pattern seemed to be connected to some sort of unbelievable laws and laws. Every single pattern seemed to be able to draw in the laws of the universe and possessed some sort of mysterious power. These patterns appeared continuously, and in the end, they densely covered the surface of the body of the will condensation, completely enveloping the body of the will condensation. At this moment, it was as if the patterns did not exist at all, making the body seem like it had not changed at all. It was still crystal clear and incredibly smooth. However, the aura that the body gave off was completely different from before. An omnipotent aura spread out from the body, formed from the will. When this aura was released, Luo Fan let out a long sigh. He took a step forward and disappeared from the planet. He appeared tens of millions of miles away from the planet in an incomparably natural manner. Looking at the planet from this position, it was like a disk. Even a moon of the planet was quite far away from him. When Luo Fan disappeared, the body formed from the will at the planet's core suddenly opened its eyes. It spread its arms and raised its head towards the sky. It opened its mouth and let out a soundless howl. During this process, countless threads suddenly rushed out from all the acupoints on its body, spreading out in all directions at an unimaginable speed. In just a few breaths' time, They covered every inch of the planet like a frame, as if they were holding up the entire planet. These threads were none other than the smoke that the planetary cores had turned into. However, the threads that the smoke had condensed into were not just condensed. Instead, they had changed their nature through some sort of unbelievable and profound method, making them extremely tough. Almost every single thread could withstand 100 billion tons of weight without deforming at all. Moreover, these threads had fused with the laws of the universe to a certain extent, allowing them to turn the power of nothingness into something material. It was impossible to describe how profound it was. After the threads covered the planet, the body formed from the will. Luo Fan suddenly clenched his hands. It was as if he was pulling in all the threads that had rushed out from his acupoints. In that instant, all the threads rapidly shrank. Moreover, this shrinkage was not just limited to the threads. Instead, it shrank along with the planetary regions that were connected to the threads, which was to say, the entire planet. This shrinkage was not as simple as ordinary people thought. Instead, it was a shrinkage that seemed to be somewhere between time and space, matter and energy. This shrinkage caused the entire planet's shape to not change at all during the shrinkage process. Instead, the entire planet's size was slowly shrinking in some unimaginable way. This shrinkage was not the kind that could be achieved by using some sort of ability to shrink artifacts or objects. Instead, it was as if the entire void was being compressed and shrunk together, but the body of the planet did not change at all. The profoundness behind this was rather subtle and difficult to put into words. The speed at which the planet shrunk was rather fast. In just a few dozen breaths' time, it had shrunk from its original diameter of tens of thousands of kilometers to a diameter of tens of thousands of meters. It was just enough to envelop the body formed from the will. At this moment, the satellite of the planet, which was originally extremely tiny, seemed incomparably huge. Instead, it acted on the planet, pulling the planet into its orbit. It was as if it wanted to reverse the status of the two, turning itself into a planet and the shrunken planet into its satellite. Far away from the planet, Luo Fan smiled and raised his hand to press down. A huge, invisible palm instantly passed through the void and appeared on the satellite. As if pressing down on a tennis ball, it pressed down on the planet. The satellite violently trembled, and indeed, it was pressed down by the invisible hand like a tennis ball, crashing into the shrunken planet. During this process, it continued to shrink like the planet before, until it finally turned into a miniature satellite that continuously revolved around the planet. Only when the transformation was complete did the planet tremble and suddenly shrink, causing the satellite to shrink at a speed that was many times faster than before. In the blink of an eye, it had already entered the body formed from the will, leaving only the body formed from the will in the void. The planet and the satellite had already completely disappeared. The body formed from the will stood in the void with its eyes closed. Strange ripples continuously spread out from its body in all directions. The entire universe seemed to have undergone a strange change due to the ripples, producing a strange power that continuously attacked the body formed from the will. Due to this change, the body of will began to shrink at a speed that was neither fast nor slow. 10,000 feet, 9,999, 998, 998, 998 feet. Although the entire process was not fast or slow, it was extremely steady, as if no power or change could stop it. In the end, after several hours, the ripples from the body formed from the will had completely disappeared, and the changes had completely calmed down. At this moment, the body formed from the will had already shrunk to around 8 feet, and it was no different from Luo Fan's body. Moreover, there were no signs of the will being formed from the outside. Looking at the veins on its skin and the pores on its hair, it was a living embodiment of blood. Chapter 636. For 1,000 years in an instant, the body entered a mysterious world. There was no up or down in this world, no space, only pure power. The entire world was a world of power. All the power emitted all sorts of unbelievable brilliance, making the world colorful and bright. When the body formed by Luo Fan's spiritual sense doppelganger entered this world, it naturally turned into a force and integrated with the endless power. It started to work hard to understand the mysteries of the power and improve its own understanding of the power. This world was actually still the Earth's universe. At this moment, the incarnation formed by Luo Fan's spiritual sense doppelganger was still in the Earth's universe. Every trace of the endless power that it saw could still be found in the Earth's universe. It could be said that all the power was just a projection of a certain existence in the Earth's universe. Or perhaps the various existences in the Earth's universe were just a projection of this power. The reason why there was such a change in perspective was not because of anything else, but because when Luo Fan's cultivation realm rose to the level of innate zenith heaven, he naturally saw through the essence of the spiritual sense doppelganger and naturally understood the source of the spiritual sense doppelganger. Luo Fan's spiritual sense doppelganger was originally a spiritual sense that was naturally condensed from the power of an innate zenith heaven cultivator and was refined by him. In essence, it was just a spiritual sense that controlled power. It behaved exactly the same as a real living being, but in fact, there was an extremely subtle difference. This difference was not too obvious before his cultivation realm reached that level. At most, his spiritual sense doppelganger's control over power could reach an unimaginable level. However, when his cultivation realm reached the level where he was not obstructed by all appearances, he could understand the specific reason for this difference. It was completely the difference in the essence of life. The spiritual sense doppelganger could be said to not belong to the physical level and did not belong to the level of the Earth's universe. Instead, it belonged to the level of power. Its true perspective and true way of existence was to exist as a force. Since it existed as a force, its perspective was naturally the perspective of power. In its eyes, the entire universe was naturally completely different from what ordinary living beings saw. That was why there was such a change. Luo Fan, who had become a connate, grand, heavenly realm cultivator, hovered in the air. His eyes were not moved by the disappearance of his spiritual sense clone. His eyes were still staring ahead at the spot where the spiritual sense clone had vanished. If he were to observe it solely from the perspective of a connate golden immortal, then he would only be able to faintly notice a strand of faint energy existing there. But with the connection with his spiritual sense doppelganger, he could easily see through that power and its true appearance. He could even see the appearance of that power from the perspective of a normal living being, like looking into a mirror. I still need some changes to be able to truly obstruct the detection of connate golden immortals. After carefully sensing it, such a thought flashed within Luo Fan's mind. After this thought flashed through his mind, he did not hesitate and casually pointed a finger. The surrounding boundless laws and boundless laws started to undergo some strange changes. These changes were subtle and profound. If one were to distinguish every single rule, every single law, it would seem as if nothing had happened, as if nothing had changed. But if one observed it as a whole, one would notice that the changes had almost completely changed the universe and the world. The result of this change was that the traces of Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone had instantly disappeared. Even Luo Fan could only barely sense the existence of the spiritual sense clone and the state of the spiritual sense clone's body, but he could no longer accurately determine the location of the spiritual sense clone. At this moment, the spiritual sense clone had also begun to activate its profound power. The power it had transformed into had various strange fluctuations that connected with the other powers in this world of power, creating a strange resonance. The changes in this world of power caused by the changes in the laws and boundless laws were constantly assimilated into the spiritual sense clone's body, allowing the spiritual sense clone to gradually possess the characteristics after the changes in the laws and boundless laws. This allowed the spiritual sense clone to maintain the characteristics of the changes in the laws and boundless laws. The difficulty of this was naturally not small. After all, the spiritual sense clone had to assimilate the changes in the laws and boundless laws into the spiritual sense clone's own essence. It was a process of changing the essence of life, and the amount of energy and time required was rather shocking. It would take at least a few thousand years for it to be truly perfect. Moreover, this was because the main body of this earth had already become a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator and possessed unbelievable divine abilities, which allowed it to complete such a change in such a short period of time. If the main body of this earth did not already possess such divine abilities, this period of time would have been at least 100 times longer. After slightly calculating the time required, Luo Fan smiled and directly sat cross-legged in space. He closed his eyes and began to use his mind to communicate with the grand heavenly realm and comprehend the unbelievable mysteries contained within it. The grand heavenly realm was like an abyss, and even saints could not comprehend it completely. Although Luo Fan had used a rather violent method to break through and comprehend the mysteries of the grand heavenly realm to become a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator, his comprehension of the grand heavenly realm was probably less than a billionth of the true grand heavenly realm. There were still endless mysteries within the grand heavenly realm waiting for him to comprehend and obtain. This was precisely the best path for him to improve his cultivation after becoming a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator. Coupled with the fact that even though Luo Fan had agreed to put an end to the karma between him and the person that attacked him over 100,000 years ago, he wasn't in a hurry. In any case, a few thousand years was only an instant for a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator, so waiting here for a few thousand years wasn't a big deal. Thus, at this moment, he directly closed his eyes and started to comprehend the grand heavenly realm. As for whether the middle-aged man that was waiting for Luo Fan to put an end to the karma between him and the middle-aged man would launch another attack during this process, Luo Fan wasn't worried at all because the possibility of that was extremely small. After all, even though a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator was practically omnipotent, the level of their strength was still limited in the end. So it was utterly strenuous and unrewarding to deal with a connate grand heavenly realm cultivator from such a great distance. If he attacked from afar, then the consumption of energy was too great, yet the effect he obtained was extremely tiny, and it was even to the extent that he was unable to stop the middle-aged man from leaving. Under such circumstances, attacking from afar was absolutely not a wise choice. As for personally coming over to attack Luo Fan, that was even more absurd. In his heavenly passage, he had the right time, the right place, and the right people. In any case, Luo Fan would go there sooner or later to settle his karma. So why should he give up the right time, the right place, and the right people to come? After he attained the connate grand heavenly realm, even though Luo Fan's will hadn't improved by much, it was countless times more profound than before. If he wanted to comprehend the grand heavenly realm, then he naturally wouldn't just forcefully charge into the grand heavenly realm and forcefully endure the backlash from the grand heavenly realm to obtain all sorts of profundities from it. When he closed his eyes, he gradually entered into a daze and a state of mind where he had no one and no self. The grand heavenly realm that was hidden within the grand heavenly realm enveloped him imperceptibly, and his thoughts drifted along the shapeless and vast existence. Strands of profound principles flowed through his mind at all times, and they left behind bits and pieces of traces within his soul. His cultivation started to rise slightly along with this. Even though this rise was so small that it was practically indistinguishable, it was still an increase after all. This sort of rise was naturally much slower than when he forcefully obtained all sorts of profundities from the grand heavenly realm. And the number of principles and profundities he comprehended at all times was much lesser than before. However, this method was extremely gentle, and he didn't remember any backlash from the grand heavenly realm at all. It was as if the grand heavenly realm naturally had all sorts of profound principles and principles pouring down towards him. It was even to the extent that it didn't have the aimlessness of when he forcefully obtained it in the past. The principles and profundities that flowed through his mind at all times and left behind traces in his soul were all related to the principles and profundities he had comprehended before he was a child. They were constantly deepening everything he had comprehended in the past, and they were allowing him to continuously move forward along the path he had chosen in the past. This sort of method seemed to be much slower than forcefully obtaining it in the past, but if it continued for a long time, then the gains would definitely be countless times greater than forcefully obtaining it in the past. Perhaps to put it in another way, forcefully obtaining it was like having sex. It was fast and straightforward, but it was only a one-time thing, normally speaking. On the other hand, Luo Fan's current method was like picking up a girl. It was slow and roundabout, but the gains in the end could last a lifetime if he succeeded and didn't regret it. As time passed by, strands of chi flowed out of Luo Fan's body from an unknown place, and they gradually intertwined and combined behind his head, forming the embryonic form of a strange chi flow. This ball of chi was green in color, and it carried a hint of the color of chaos. Although it was only an embryonic form, it carried an unbreakable, extremely stable, and extremely perfect aura. The strands of chi flowed ceaselessly within it, and every single chi flow seemed to have some sort of profound connection with every other chi flow. It was as if this ball of chi flow would instantly collapse and vanish into nothingness if any single strand of chi flow was missing. The trajectory of every single strand of chi flow was extremely profound, and it contained all sorts of profundities that couldn't be described with words. It contained some sort of supreme divine ability, and it evolved into all sorts of strange cultivation methods. If a cultivator visualized these chi flows, they could directly cultivate a supreme divine ability without any cultivation method. Even if they couldn't become an innate Grand Luo, it was not impossible for them to become an innate leakless golden core. When this ball of chi appeared, the mysterious aura on Luo Fan's body instantly vanished without a trace. The great perfection aura that he originally emanated and the almost omnipotent aura seemed to have been transferred to the ball of chi after it appeared, and there was no longer any trace of his original form. He hovered in the air like an extremely ordinary mortal. That ball of chi hovered behind Luo Fan's head, and as time passed, more and more chi flow joined it. With every strand of chi flow that joined it, the ball of chi would become a little more complete. With every strand of chi flow that joined it, the great perfection aura emanating from the ball of chi would become stronger. This ball of chi was none other than a Grand Luo, or rather, Luo Fan's Grand Luo. The Grand Luo was the meaning of great perfection, and it was also a description of a realm. When any cultivator became an innate Grand Luo, they would naturally be able to comprehend the profundities of the Grand Luo and the truth of great perfection. Then, they would be able to turn the great perfection from nothingness into a material existence, allowing the great perfection to reveal its physical form. However, it was obvious that achieving this step and turning the great perfection from nothingness into a material existence from the description of a realm was not something that could be achieved by becoming an innate Grand Luo. In order to achieve this, one would need to have an extremely deep understanding of the profundities of the Grand Luo and to supplement and expand the profundities of the Grand Luo. Just like when Luo Fan had just become an innate Grand Luo, he couldn't condense the great perfection at all. It was only when he started to comprehend the Grand Tao and started to increase his cultivation that he was able to condense it into a material form behind his head. Moreover, even if it was condensed, it was only a frame, an embryonic form. If he wanted to make it complete and perfect, he would need to spend endless time and energy to perfect it. On the other hand, condensing the Grand Luo from nothingness into material form wasn't just a matter of cultivation. It was a method to display one's cultivation. In fact, condensing the Grand Luo from nothingness into material form was like putting a steel suit on Iron Man, and the might of one's divine ability would be increased by a few times, a few dozen times, or even a few hundred or a few thousand times. Just like Luo Fan at this moment. Even though he'd only constructed the frame and embryonic form of this ball of air, the might of his divine ability was at least 10 times stronger than before. Moreover, it was still improving at a considerable speed. The reason it possessed such a profound effect was because after the Grand Luo was condensed from nothingness into material form, its ability to utilize the Grand Tao, its ability to control the laws, and its ability to influence the universe had all condensed from nothingness into material form and obtained an unimaginable increase. Such an increase was obviously capable of greatly increasing the might of the divine ability that an innate Grand Luo could exert. Moreover, because all sorts of abilities were condensed from nothingness into material form, the comprehension of the Grand Tao that couldn't be found had become a method to rely on, so it naturally became much easier, and the improvement of one's cultivation would be much faster because of this. It could be said that the Grand Luo that had condensed into material form was the most important cultivation support and weapon for an innate Grand Luo. Time passed quickly, and 4,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. During these 4,000 years, Luo Fan had always been floating motionlessly in space, and it was even to the extent that his clothes didn't change at all. On the other hand, the embryonic form of the ball of air behind his head was much more complete than when it was first formed. Even though it was still thin and illusory at this moment, the strands of air were dense to the point they formed a large expanse. It was difficult to tell that it was constructed from strands of air, and it seemed as if it had already taken the shape of a ball of air as soon as it appeared. On this day, Luo Fan's body suddenly shook, and then his eyes opened abruptly. He looked towards the space ahead, and his eyes pierced through space as if he'd seen some sort of profound existence hidden in the depths of space. The ball of air behind his head didn't change at all when he opened his eyes, and it was still wriggling and surging like it had been for a few thousand years. The aura of perfection it emanated didn't change at all. In a daze, a blurry figure seemed to be reflected in Luo Fan's eyes. The figure was also sitting cross-legged in space, and it didn't move at all. However, there were countless strange lights constantly intertwining around it, as if it wanted to devour the figure and make it fuse into it. The figure was obviously Luo Fan's consciousness clone. After thousands of years, Luo Fan's consciousness clone had almost completely assimilated the laws around it, and became even more untraceable and hidden. Even though Luo Fan's divine ability power had been strengthened by dozens of times due to condensing the Grand Luo material body, coupled with the connection between himself and his spiritual sense avatar, he could only vaguely see such a shadow. The growth of the spiritual sense avatar's concealment ability could be imagined. At this time, when Luo Fan used his ability to check the consciousness clone, it wasn't because of the growth of the consciousness clone's stealth ability, but because of the changes that had occurred in the consciousness clone's body at this moment. In the depths of the consciousness clone, in a strange space-time that seemed like the void of the universe, a planet and a satellite were quietly suspended in it. Outside the planet, there were strands of strange light constantly scattered in the surrounding barrier of this strange space-time, shining on the planet and the satellite, providing them with a light source. The planet and the satellite were obviously the planet and the satellite that Luo Fan's consciousness clone had refined. The way they existed at this time was extremely mysterious and simply surpassed the limits of description. This strange space-time was constructed by the consciousness clone's will and could be said to be an extremely idealistic space-time. At this moment, it seemed to be hidden in the depths of the consciousness clone's body, but the truth was much more complicated than that. This space-time could also be said to contain the entire consciousness clone, and it could also be said that the consciousness clone was hidden in the depths of the space-time. This planet was the body of the consciousness clone and contained the consciousness clone. The consciousness clone was the consciousness of this planet and was within this planet. This planet was within this space-time, and this space-time was within the consciousness clone's body. These three formed a strange cycle, so strange and so contradictory. The principles contained within were extremely profound. It was an indescribable understanding of space-time that Luo Fan had after becoming a Grand Luo, and represented his cultivation after becoming a Grand Luo. Chapter 676. Creation 4,000 years. Chapter 676. Creation. Chapter 637. At this moment, what caught Luo Fan's attention was the planet that had a mysterious relationship with the spiritual sense clone. The planet suddenly trembled, and a sound wave that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from the surface of the planet, spreading throughout the entire strange space-time. Following that, one after another, strange sound waves rang out one after another. In the end, they mixed together and formed a rumbling thunderclap that reverberated in the entire strange space-time. These sound waves grew louder and louder, stronger and more intense. The entire space-time seemed to be unable to withstand these thunderous sound waves and began to tremble slightly. Fortunately, this space-time was created by the spiritual sense clone's will. As long as the spiritual sense clone's powerful will did not collapse, the space-time would not collapse. Therefore, although the vibrations became more and more intense under the continuous stacking of the infinite sound waves, and the entire space-time gradually showed signs of collapsing, it still remained intact and stable, as if the vibrations were just vibrations and space-time had nothing to do with it. Gradually, more and more shadows appeared out of thin air on the surface of the planet. These shadows were illusory at first, but as time passed and the sound waves that shook the entire space-time grew stronger, the shadows also became more and more real. These shadows varied in size. The big ones were like mountains, and the small ones were no bigger than a fist. Each one of them was one of the bloodline clones of the 8 ancestors and many other cultivators in the Child and Mother Star system. In other words, each one of them was a mysterious, strange beast. In just a short while, the entire planet was filled with these countless strange beasts. Every single one of those exotic beasts was roaring at the sky. Their roars were extremely loud, and when they interweaved together, they formed a thunderous sound that shook the entire space-time, almost causing it to collapse. At first, these sounds only shook space-time, but when all the strange beasts condensed, these sounds were so powerful that they produced some kind of strange transformation. A faintly discernible spirituality was gradually produced in these sound waves. This spirituality was not strong. At least, it was much weaker than the spirituality produced by the shock waves of the Great Tao's backlash. It was also much weaker than the spirituality produced by the shock waves that destroyed the Child and Mother Star system. However, it was still some kind of mysterious spirituality. The emergence of this spirituality caused the sound waves that were originally quickly disappearing to increase greatly, causing these sound waves to gradually accumulate in this space-time. The spirituality generated by the sound waves was extremely weak, and they couldn't control themselves at all. As they piled up, they naturally separated according to their own characteristics, gradually forming the shapes of exotic beasts in the air. Gradually, more and more exotic beast silhouettes appeared in the entire space-time. When these strange beast silhouettes appeared, the accumulated sound waves seemed to have found an organization. After gaining spirituality, they began to continuously gather towards these strange beast silhouettes, constantly enriching these silhouettes. These silhouettes gradually deepened from their originally transparent appearance, becoming more and more distinct. Their forms also gradually solidified. In the end, when the sound waves that formed these silhouettes collapsed, these silhouettes had almost solidified, just like the magnification of the strange beasts that emitted these sound waves on the planet. They lined up in the space, densely packed, and almost completely filled the entire space. At this moment, the strange beasts on the planet had finally fully formed. They had also finished venting and stopped roaring. As they stopped roaring, the strange beasts that condensed the sound waves in the space began to struggle endlessly. Sound waves were sound waves, after all. Even if they had a weak spirituality, they were still sound waves. Since they were sound waves, they would naturally quickly dissipate. Even though the sound waves had condensed into the shapes of the strange beasts, the spirituality they contained was still not enough to maintain the process of condensing, let alone condensing their bodies through cultivation. Naturally, they could only gradually collapse and dissipate after losing the supply of sound waves. The reason they were struggling so hard was because their weak spirituality was instinctively resisting the dissipation and collapse of the sound waves. Under normal circumstances, such weak resistance wouldn't have any effect at all. In a few breaths' time, all the strange beasts would surely collapse and dissipate without a trace. However, the positions of these strange beasts were under some strange law, matching with some mysterious distribution and forming a strange formation. When the strange beasts started struggling, they naturally gave birth to some unyielding will, finally activating this formation. In an instant, boundless light burst forth. Strange sound waves suddenly transmitted between the strange beasts, connecting all the sound waves together. The sound waves contained in each of the strange beasts began to resonate with one another, forming a strange balance in the end. Every sound wave exotic beast used the sound waves transmitted by the other beasts as motivation to activate their dissipating sound waves, allowing them to maintain their integrity and stop the dissipation process. Following this change, the formation gradually produced a strange wave of sound waves. They gathered in one spot and gathered at the center of the formation, instantly wrapping around the planet and satellite in the center. The wave of sound waves was incredibly mysterious, vaguely emitting the aura of perfection. However, it also seemed illusory, like it was only an imitation of sound waves. Its profoundness simply couldn't be described with words. When a wave of sound waves wrapped around the planet and satellite in the center, all the strange beasts on the planet trembled. Suddenly, roars rang out. At this moment, the roars no longer collided with the space-time. Instead, they were completely devoured by the formation formed by the surrounding sound wave exotic beasts, directly converted into the sound wave exotic beast power, allowing them to grow stronger. As the sound wave exotic beasts grew stronger, the formation's power began to rise. The wave of sound waves produced by the formation, wrapping around the planet and satellite, also began to grow stronger. This kind of growth continued without end. At a certain moment, the wave of sound waves that seemed to contain the aura of perfection finally rose to a certain mysterious level, breaking through an unbelievable limit. It instantly turned illusory into reality, producing a world-shaking explosive force. This explosive force acted on the planet and satellite without any leakage. It instantly caused the planet and satellite to collapse, turning it into dust. At this moment, if a gentle breeze were to blow, the dust would probably disperse and fill up the entire space-time, causing it to become misty. But it was clear that under the power of the sound wave, there was no breeze that could blow the dust away. The dust could only accumulate and roll in the power of the sound wave. During this process, the roars of the exotic beasts continued to ring out endlessly. Instead, they seemed to be stimulated, growing louder and louder, becoming more and more intense. The power of the entire formation grew stronger and stronger, and the sound waves grew stronger and stronger as well. After an unknown period of time, the countless dust particles that were rolling in the sound waves suddenly trembled and began to gather towards the countless nodes. The speed at which they gathered was unimaginably fast, causing the fog enveloped by the sound waves to become thinner and thinner. Strange existences gradually appeared in the fog. In the end, when all the dust particles had gathered, the existence that was constantly attracting the dust particles finally showed itself. It was the countless strange beasts. At this moment, the countless strange beasts seemed to have turned real. The aura each beast exuded showed absolute intelligence. It was as if the strange beasts from before were just sculptures, and they had only turned from sculptures into real beasts now. Suddenly, the strange beasts stopped roaring at the same time. Indescribable power radiated from their bodies at the same time. These energies surged and connected with each other. In the end, all the exotic beasts were connected into one, forming an incomparably complete and mysterious formation. This formation was incredibly profound. It was exactly the same as the formation formed by the sound wave beasts outside. Other than the difference in size, there was no difference at all. The power that the strange beast released earlier was like the key to activating this formation, allowing it to operate unstoppably. An indescribable pulling force gradually formed within the formation. Under this pulling force, the sound wave energy surrounding them was gradually pulled into it. As the sound wave energy was pulled in, the formation formed by the sound wave beasts gradually shrank as well, being pulled into the formation formed by the real beasts. The pulling force was extremely shocking. The power of the sound waves and the speed at which the exotic beasts were pulled into the formation was extremely fast. In just a few breaths' time, all of the power of the sound waves had fused into the formation. All of the exotic beasts were pulled into the formation and fused with the exotic beasts that had created the sound waves. It seemed like a huge, faint, illusionary layer had appeared around the exotic beasts, wrapping around them. After all these changes, the pulling force from the formation did not stop. Instead, it continued spreading outwards, becoming stronger and stronger, more and more mysterious, and more profound. The entire space-time seemed to be shaking under this force. Strands of strange existences came out from the depths of the space-time, constantly being pulled into the formation. The formation kept growing, and its power kept increasing. As the strands of strange existences were pulled into the formation, the strange space-time also strangely shrunk. It was as if the strands of strange existences were the origin of the strange space-time, and the moment they entered it, the entire strange space-time would be devoured. At the same time, Luo Fan, who was outside, saw the consciousness clone hiding in the depths of the void, in the form of power, gradually shrinking in a strange way. The method of shrinking was very strange, as if some inexplicable existence was continuously devouring it. Outsiders might not be able to understand this process, but as the main body of the consciousness clone, Luo Fan was very clear about it. He even felt rather satisfied and happy. Such a change was none other than the unexpected harvest that the consciousness clone had obtained in the past 4,000 years. It had broken through its original shackles and was about to return to its original form, truly turning into the power that had condensed this consciousness clone in the first place. Luo Fan's spiritual sense doppelganger was extremely mysterious, but at its root, it was the spiritual sense that was condensed from the power of the 8 ancestors of cultivation in the interconnected star system, along with numerous cultivators, with the help of countless Dharma artifacts. Although this spiritual sense was compatible with that power and had a cultivation realm close to that of a Khanate grand heavenly immortal, it was still that power after all. Without that power, the power of the spiritual sense itself had weakened by tens of thousands of times. Not to mention surpassing the limits of that power and becoming a true cultivator, it was impossible to even reach the level of that power. Because of this, although Luo Fan had used various means to find a body for this spiritual sense doppelganger over the past 100,000 years, constantly improving its will, and even used a special method to integrate the entire planet into the spiritual sense doppelganger 4,000 years ago, so that the spiritual sense doppelganger could understand the Earth and the universe from the perspective of power without any worries. This spiritual sense doppelganger still could not break through the shackles and reach the original realm of power. It was still limited to the realm of the Khanate Zenith Heaven. Even though it was infinitely close, if that was not the case, the consciousness clone could be said to be a considerable help. Why would Luo Fan hide it, and even make it so that all the Khanate Zenith Heaven cultivators could not detect it before he dared to find the middle-aged man to settle the karma? At this moment, what was happening to the consciousness clone was a process that Luo Fan originally planned to complete with countless years of accumulation. Refining the planet into a body was a way for Luo Fan to strengthen his spiritual sense doppelganger. It was a step that allowed his spiritual sense doppelganger to have a real breakthrough, but it was not his ultimate goal. After all, he had seen how Yin Kong spent hundreds of millions of years to get rid of the shackles of the planet and become a Buddha. He was very clear about the consequences of completely integrating the consciousness clone into the planet. How could he fall into the awkward situation of Yin Kong again? The real purpose of Luo Fan, refining the planet into a body, was to use the power and resources of the planet to finally condense the countless magic tools and beasts that he had set up at the beginning. He wanted to replicate the formation method of that power and condense that power again, and finally use that power to become the real body of the consciousness clone, so that the consciousness clone could break through the shackles and become a supreme existence similar to the Khanate Zenith Heaven cultivators. This process, in Luo Fan's original thought, would at least take tens of millions of years or even hundreds of millions of years to achieve. However, accidents happened almost all the time. Before Luo Fan was mentally prepared, he only spent 4,000 years to understand the Earth and the universe from the perspective of power, and he actually comprehended the key to a breakthrough on a whim. With an unimaginable speed, he achieved the breakthrough that he had prepared for thousands of years to achieve. At this moment, the strange beasts that existed in the strange space and time in the depths of the consciousness clone were all projections of Luo Fan's consciousness clone. It could almost be said that every exotic beast was Luo Fan, and every exotic beast was just one side of the spiritual sense avatar. Luo Fan's sudden whim was the key to understanding this point. The consciousness clone was originally condensed from the power stimulated by the formation formed by countless strange beasts. It could be said that it was the whole of all the strange beasts, including the characteristics of all the strange beasts. In other words, all the exotic beasts that made up the formation could be considered as a side of the spiritual sense doppelganger. As long as one used the appropriate method, the process could be reversed and the spiritual sense doppelganger could be divided into countless exotic beast spiritual senses. As long as the consciousness of the countless strange beasts existed, it would naturally be extremely easy to condense these countless strange beasts again and then condense the formation. As for the magic tools that formed part of the formation, it was even easier. Those magic tools were originally refined by many cultivators using the materials on the planet. With the existence of the planet, why would there be a need to worry about the magic tools being insufficient? How could the formation constructed with the resources and energy of the planet be inferior to those magic tools? It was precisely because of this that the various situations that occurred to Luo Fan's consciousness clone occurred. The changes of the spiritual sense doppelganger continued. Unknowingly, the consciousness clone had shrunk into an extremely small singularity that was almost undetectable. This small singularity was strange and unusual. It seemed to contain an infinite space, but it also seemed so small that it didn't have an interior. In that strange space and time, the formation formed by countless strange beasts had become incomparably huge. The surrounding space and time had also reached an unimaginable degree, turning into a strange singularity that appeared in the center of the formation. At this moment, the formation formed by countless strange beasts seemed to have appeared in a stretch of nothingness. The surroundings were pitch black. There was no space, no matter, no energy, as if it was an indescribable stretch of nothingness. Then, the entire formation shook, and a wave of power filled with the aura of great perfection was born in the center of the formation. It rushed straight into the singularity, half of it in the formation, while the other half was in the center of the formation. After that, the formation suddenly shrank, as if it was devoured by that wave of power. It completely shrank into that wave of power, as if it had completely melted and disappeared without a trace. After that, that wave of power shrank and completely disappeared into the stretch of nothingness where only the singularity existed. After it disappeared, the singularity shook and also disappeared without a trace. At the same time, in the universe on Earth, the void trembled, and a figure that looked like Luo Fan directly stepped through the void, directly replacing the singularity and appearing in Luo Fan's senses. Chapter 677, Unexpected Gains. Chapter 638. This figure did not leave the colorful world that was completely formed by power. It was still in a completely hidden state compared to the Earth's universe. However, there was a strange ripple that spread in all directions from that location. In an instant, it spread across a huge area of tens of thousands of light years, causing a strange change to occur in this area. It seemed like all the powers within this area had undergone a strange transformation during this process. It seemed like these powers already had a master, and all the powers had been integrated into a strange whole. This feeling was so strange. It was similar to the scale when Luo Fan became a Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm Cultivator, but the nature was completely different. Although they both had similar profundities, they were in two completely different directions. This kind of fluctuation was extremely obscure. Although the change it caused was so mysterious, even Luo Fan, who was in the center of this change, found it difficult to sense this change with his own senses. Only through the perception of his spiritual sense avatar could he completely confirm that this mysterious change really existed. After all, this fluctuation affected power, and it was the power that was extremely deeply hidden, the power that formed the Earth's universe. This power could only be clearly seen from the perspective of the power itself, from the perspective of ordinary living beings. Even if it was a Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm Cultivator, they could only vaguely feel its existence. Under such circumstances, how could the changes of these powers be so easily seen by a Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm Cultivator? It's finally done. Although he could not see it clearly with his own eyes, these changes were caused by his spiritual sense clone after all. Therefore, at the instant the fluctuation appeared, such a thought suddenly flashed through Luo Fan's mind. After that thought, an indescribable smile appeared on his face. He did not stop and lightly lifted his foot and took a step forward. His figure instantly disappeared on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already several tens of light years away. He took another step, and another several tens of light years away. The entire process was extremely natural. It was like an ordinary person taking a stroll in the light. There were no fluctuations at all, and no power was triggered. It did not even cause any distortion in space. It was as if this step of several tens of light years was his most ordinary and ordinary step. As Luo Fan's main body in the Earth's universe left this star system, the spiritual sense clone that had fused into the world of power trembled and opened its eyes again. At this moment, the world in his eyes had already undergone a tremendous change. This world of power was still colorful, and it was still completely different from the Earth's universe. However, there was a strange law added to it. Every color, and every power had a strange form. These forms were faintly similar to ordinary matter. It was as if they were shapes left behind by various material existences through some kind of transformation. With a glance, he could even tell which power was a star, which power was a planet, which power was a meteorite belt, and which power was the acquired chi of heaven and earth that filled the void of the universe. In the world, there was no space and no. In other words, even space was just a kind of power in the world of power. It was precisely because of this that this world was indeed not far away. Planets that were tens of thousands of light years away seemed to be right in front of him. He could even faintly see a very familiar existence at the edge of his vision. It seemed to be the Earth. This world of power was not far away. There seemed to be no space and no. It was as if the entire Earth's universe could be seen clearly by him in an instant. But of course, that was impossible. There were no restrictions on space, but there were other restrictions. That was the vision of this spiritual sense clone and the endurance of this spiritual sense clone. As long as the distance in reality exceeded a certain limit, this spiritual sense clone could no longer see its existence, just like the Earth. It was a galaxy away from this star system, and it was tens of thousands of light years away. Such a distance had already exceeded Luo Fan's endurance. If it were not for the fact that Luo Fan was too familiar with the Earth, he might not even be able to see that vague shadow. With a slight thought, the ability to completely assimilate the rules and principles and completely hide himself in the world of power, making it impossible for the outside world to detect him, was completed in an instant. With a thought, his body shook, and he directly left this star system, leaving the abnormal range of the rules and principles that Luo Fan had set up. However, there was still no trace of it. It was obvious that he had completely hidden himself. After sensing it slightly, the spiritual sense clone knew that the arrangements he'd set up at that time had taken effect. At this moment, he was completely invisible to the connate, golden, immortal realm cultivators of the entire Earth's universe. Since it's effective, it seems that the main body wants to end the karma. I can also be of great help. The spiritual sense clone thought so. His body swayed, and he kept striding in a certain direction. In this world of power, space was also a form of power. If one wanted to travel a long distance, they couldn't just fly like they could in the real universe. Instead, they had to find a power that represented space, attach themselves to it, and move along with it. This might be extremely difficult for Luo Fan in the past. At the very least, he would need a long period of time to comprehend it. However, that was only in the past. To the current Luo Fan, finding this force was like an instinct, and he could almost do it with just a thought. After all, the spiritual sense clone now had a body with power. The cultivation of his spiritual sense clone had completely risen to the level of the power that had condensed his spiritual sense. It had become another cultivation system, but its cultivation realm was equivalent to the supreme existence of the connate grand heavenly realm. That cultivation system was not anything else but pure power. Before attaining the innate grand Luo realm, cultivating one's strength was purely about continuously improving and purifying one's strength to an unbelievable degree, and also purifying one's strength to an extreme extent. However, as long as one broke through that shackle and reached the innate grand Luo realm, such cultivation would become another form. At that time, the strength of one's power could be said to be strong to a certain limit. Purely accumulating and purifying power could no longer improve one's realm and sublimate one's life essence. At that time, what was needed was the control of power, a control that had been sublimated to the level of the laws, and grand Taos. When such control had been sublimated to that level, it was almost like the ruler of power. Any power, as long as it was ownerless, could be considered his power in front of such a cultivator. All powers would be under his complete control the moment he laid his eyes on them, even if it would take him a long time to comprehend the essence and mysteries of these powers. It was precisely because of this that this world of power was simply a blessed land of cultivation for the spiritual sense clone. All the powers here were existences that could be grasped and controlled at will. Under such circumstances, it was naturally extremely easy for him to find the power that represented space. It was even to the extent that it was not difficult to find the power that represented space. At this moment, he just glanced at it, and he found the power that represented space amidst the boundless and complicated power. His body moved, and he attached himself to the power of space. With a tremble, he instantly traversed the void and headed towards the endless depths of the universe. In this world of power, it was also a type of power. It was just that this power was entangled with all other powers. Any power, no matter how pure it was, contained a trace of power. It was the same for the power of space. Therefore, although there was no space in this world of power, Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone attached itself to the power of space. In the process of moving along with this power, it was not that he did not have to expend any energy. In fact, it even consumed more energy. Although the speed was extremely shocking, it was relatively only about the same as his main body in the Earth's universe. It was precisely because of this that during the process of moving and flying, Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone still had the time to comprehend the mysteries of power and understand the essence of the various powers that he was currently controlling. Everything in the Earth's universe existed in space. Therefore, in this world of power, the power of space permeated everywhere. Almost all powers were attached to the power of space. Regardless of whether it represented planets, stars, meteorites, living beings, or the power of magma, it was the same. Space was inseparable. So these powers were also mixed with other powers and almost became an inseparable whole. This caused power to be everywhere in this world of power, but in its purest form, it could only appear at the same time as the power of space. Almost all of the space in the Earth's universe was void. Only an extremely small portion of it existed in the form of matter like galaxies. Although the majority of the void was filled with all sorts of strange yuan qi and various kinds of energy, they were not true gases after all. However, they were not real gases after all, and were fundamentally different from the air on a planet. The air on a planet was a matter, and like the planet, it existed by relying on space. As such, in this world of power, it was entangled with the power of space, and they were inseparable. As long as the power of space was removed, these existences would instantly collapse and disappear, completely destroyed. The various strange yuan qi and energy were different. They were essentially energy and were close to power. They were naturally separated from space, but they did not exist by relying on space. As such, in this world of power, although the various strange yuan qi and energy were mixed with the power of space, they were not compatible with each other. These characteristics caused this world of power to contain extremely pure mixed power of space. As he comprehended the mysteries of this world of power, Luo Fan felt that this world of power was extremely vast and profound. He sensed the mysteries contained within it that were not inferior to the mysteries of the Earth's universe. In fact, he even understood that his ability to destroy or change nature had already far surpassed that of his main body in the Earth's universe. This was because in this world of power, as long as he thought about it, he could extract the power of space within a large range, causing all the power attached to space to instantly collapse and be completely destroyed due to the loss of the support of space power. This extraction power and the range of influence were naturally limited by his realm. With the current realm of Luo Fan's consciousness clone, it was not difficult for him to extract the power of space in a star system. This meant that with Luo Fan's current realm, if he wanted to destroy a star system, he only needed to extract the power of space in that star system with a single thought. Moreover, because space power and power were inseparable, when he extracted space power, he would definitely bring power with him. Therefore, this process could be said to not require any energy. He only needed to think about it, and the change could be completed. Even if Luo Fan's main body in the Earth's universe had become an innate zenith heavenly realm cultivator, he still could not achieve such destructive ability. Of course, this ability of his consciousness clone did not mean that he was stronger than the main body, nor did it mean that he was invincible. This ability of his consciousness clone was only effective against nature. For cultivators who had become an innate zenith heavenly realm cultivator, their strength, their bodies, and the strange ability of the consciousness clone were absolutely unable to be exerted. After becoming an innate zenith heavenly realm cultivator, the cultivator had already reached a relatively perfect state. This state had long since allowed the cultivator to become independent. Even if space was destroyed, extracted, or the planet was destroyed, it would not cause much harm to them, let alone deal a fatal blow to them. Even if it could delay their movements, it would not be able to become their main combat strength. Since this ability had lost its effectiveness, the consciousness clone could only rely on its own strength to fight the innate zenith heavenly realm cultivator. In this way, it naturally could not compare to the main body who had become an innate zenith heavenly realm cultivator, let alone be invincible. Along the way, in the process of comprehending, Luo Fan's consciousness clone gradually understood the limits of his ability. While he was delighted, he also felt slightly regretful. As the consciousness clone gradually understood what he could and could not do, the main body of the Earth universe had unknowingly traversed hundreds of thousands of light years and arrived at the center of this galaxy. After a few breaths after the main body arrived, the consciousness clone arrived as well. However, this consciousness clone still did not show himself. Instead, it hid in the world of power by relying on the method of incarnation, making it difficult for all living beings in the Earth universe to see its existence clearly. As for what the center of the galaxy looked like, Luo Fan had seen and heard countless so-called experts and scholars make countless guesses about it before he crossed over. Every one of these guesses seemed to be brilliant, as if they weren't so unreasonable. But until now, when he personally arrived at the center of this galaxy, Luo Fan just now realized how ridiculous those guesses were. There was nothing at the center of this galaxy at all, only a singularity that was so small that it was almost impossible to see its existence with normal vision. This singularity was extremely mysterious, and it produced an indescribable gravitational force. This gravitational force was unimaginably powerful. Under its effect, who knew how many billions of stars in this entire galaxy were doing complicated and mysterious revolutions on a scale of who knew how many tens of thousands of light years. It had been like this for hundreds of millions of years since ancient times. It had not changed in the slightest, and it would continue to be like this until eternity. This kind of difference between the extreme and the extremely small added to the originally extremely astonishing shock, making people involuntarily feel awe for the greatness of the universe. Standing in the void, Luo Fan looked at the extremely distant singularity that produced infinite gravitational force in the center, and a sense of awe gradually appeared in his eyes. Having a sense of awe did not mean that one was cowardly. On the contrary, only cultivators who were always filled with reverence would be able to recognize their own insignificance. Only then would they be able to clearly understand that only by working hard would they be able to ascend to the peak and obtain supreme achievements that all cultivators looked up to. After looking here for a long time, Luo Fan slowly collected his thoughts and turned his gaze to another place. He'd naturally not come here to see exactly what the center of this galaxy looked like, and he'd come here for the sake of finding the middle-aged man's abode. Moreover, the abode wasn't within the singularity. It was outside the singularity, and it was at a place that was a few tens of light years away from the singularity. Luo Fan distinguished it carefully, and he found a location of the abode he saw 4,000 years ago from a few tens of possible locations. With a command in his heart, he took a step forward, and he traversed a few tens of light years to arrive at that location. Even though this place was a few tens of light years away from the singularity, the gravitational force created by the singularity was so strong that it had arrived at an unbelievable level. It was even to the extent that space here had already undergone some sort of strange warping, and it created countless strange and dazzling scenes that caused the surroundings to become indescribably illusory. This gravitational force was absolutely lethal to ordinary cultivators. Even if it was before Luo Fan attained the first Heaven Golden Immortal Realm, he would probably only be able to barely resist this gravitational force by activating the immaculate and leakless body to the limit. However, he'd already attained the first Heaven Golden Immortal Realm now, so it was naturally different from before. When he just arrived here, it was difficult for him to endure for a time, and his body felt waves of discomfort. It was even to the extent that he showed signs of being pulled towards the singularity at the center under the effect of the gravitational force. However, after merely a few breaths of time, this gravitational force didn't affect him at all. This place was no different than any other place he'd been at, and there weren't any negative feelings that affected him at all. It was because his body, after attaining the first Heaven Golden Immortal Realm, possessed an unimaginable adaptability that allowed him to completely adapt to the adverse environment here in a few breaths of time. Chapter 678, Strength. Chapter 639. In the boundless chaos, there was an extremely vast and boundless world far away from the Earth universe. It was the Primordial world. Please go to Greensay if you're familiar with the domain name. In an extremely mysterious place in the endless starry sky of the Primordial world, there was a strange palace and 3,001 worlds that were arranged in a rather mysterious way. On this day, Luo Fan, who was sitting cross-legged on a platform in this strange palace with his eyes closed, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. He felt that there was an incomparably mysterious and abstruse path in the dark, and there was some kind of inconceivable thought being transmitted to him. Without any process, without any transformation, it fused into his mind and mind. He instantly absorbed it into his own memory, and at the same time, it turned into his comprehension. At the instant he comprehended the profundities contained within the will, Luo Fan's face that hadn't changed for countless hundreds of millions of years suddenly shook, and an indescribable ecstasy appeared on his face. So this is the grand Luo mystery. This thought suddenly flashed in his mind, and his body unknowingly emitted a strange perfected stage aura. However, this perfected stage aura only flashed before it was instantly suppressed by an indescribable existence that seemed to have come from the Supreme Tao. It instantly collapsed and disappeared without a trace. Luo Fan's figure returned to normal, and he seemed to be no different from before. When this change occurred, Luo Fan could not help but reveal an inexplicable wry smile. As expected, it's not so simple to obtain the grand Luo Dao fruit. Although this grand Luo mystery is real, it's only the grand Luo mystery of the Earth universe. Although it has a lot in common with the grand Luo mystery of the primordial world, it can't be completely equivalent. I can't rely on this grand Luo mystery to obtain the grand Luo Dao fruit. Luo Fan sighed to himself. However, this sigh only lasted for a few moments. With the profundity of the all-heaven Dao fruit in his possession, he was no longer like a blind man trying to figure out the all-heaven Tao fruit. The outline of the profundity of the all-heaven Tao fruit had already been established in his mind. What he had to do next was to rely on his own cultivation to comprehend the supreme grand Tao of the primordial world, to comprehend the natural profundities of the primordial world, and to comprehend the difference between the primordial world and the Earth universe. Through this comprehension, he would change the zenith heaven mystery and deduce the zenith heaven mystery of the primordial world, and finally obtain the zenith heaven Tao fruit. Go to green say when you read novels. Such a process was countless times easier than comprehending the profundities of an all-heaven profound from nothing. What else could he complain about? Just as he was about to carefully analyze the profundities of the Grand Luo, he suddenly felt his blood rush to his head. He could not help but smile. So that's how it is. I didn't expect that I would accidentally comprehend a technique similar to the three corpses. It's a great blessing. After that thought, he did not care about anything else. He directly immersed his mind into the zenith heaven mystery and carefully comprehended its essence. He constantly compared it with the various principles of the primordial world, trying his best to find the essence of the zenith heaven that was suitable for the primordial world. This zenith heaven mystery was, of course, transmitted by the thought that he had sent into the Earth universe. The primordial world and the Earth universe were two completely different worlds. Different universes, the space-time of the two was naturally very different. This difference resulted in the thought that Luo Fan had sent into the Earth universe for more than 100,000 years, but Luo Fan had only spent a few days in the primordial world. At this moment, it had only been dozens of hours since Luo Fan received the Zenith Heaven mystery and the Zenith Heaven mystery that his clone had sent over. In just a few days, he had obtained all sorts of gains and comprehensions that would have taken him hundreds of millions of years to obtain. It was no wonder that Luo Fan would feel excited. In fact, it was the first time in hundreds of millions of years that he had lost his composure. When he said the last sentence, it just so happened that his clone in the Earth universe broke through its shackles and became truly complete. TXT ebook, the clone in the Earth universe, was also Luo Fan. Although he had experienced many experiences in the primordial world that he had not experienced in the primordial world, his thoughts were not much different from Luo Fan's main body. The two of them were still of the same origin. It could even be said that when the Zenith Heaven mystery fused with Luo Fan's main body, the various experiences were equivalent to being received by his main body. As a result, the comprehension of the clone, naturally, could not surpass his senses. The clone's view of the state he was in was naturally the view of the main body. Because of this, Luo Fan dared to make such a conclusion with such certainty. Go to green say when you read novels. However, although this method that was similar to killing the 3 corpses was profound, it was so insignificant compared to seeking the Zenith Heaven Dao fruit. It seemed that he could break through at any time and obtain the Zenith Heaven Dao fruit at any time. Why would he waste time sorting out this method? Luo Fan was immersed in the profundities of the grand Luo Dao, carefully comprehending its profundities and sensing its essence. He felt that his cultivation was improving at every moment, and he felt that he was getting closer to the grand Luo Dao fruit at every moment. The feeling of constantly improving made him almost unable to extricate himself. His entire mind was immersed in it, and everything that happened in the outside world became more and more distant to him. Although there was the Zenith Heaven mystery before him, the difference between the earth and the primordial world was too great. This difference caused the Zenith Heaven mystery to be extremely different from the Zenith Heaven mystery of the primordial world, apart from the essence of the Zenith Heaven mystery of the Zenith Heaven mystery. It might not be difficult to deduce the Zenith Heaven mystery of the primordial world through the Zenith Heaven mystery of the primordial world, but it was extremely complicated. Even for the current Luo Fan, it would take an extremely long time for him to truly achieve this breakthrough. Fortunately, there were no bottlenecks in the entire process. As long as he had enough time, this process would definitely be completed. Luo Fan had the infinite void palace, where the flow of time was the fastest. It could even reach 130,000 times faster than the outside world. To him, time could be said to be everything, so there was naturally no need to worry. As Luo Fan entered the almost smooth process of improvement, the infinite void palace he was in also underwent various subtle changes. The entire infinite void palace, a medium-sized world, and 30 minor kiliocosms were all trembling in a strange way. This kind of trembling was extremely mysterious, and it was almost impossible to describe with words. All of the trembling combined to form a strange opening power, acting on every minor kiliocosm in that medium-sized world. These worlds were constantly expanding and evolving at a very slow speed. The strength of space, the stability of time, and the density of various kinds of vitality were all slowly increasing. When reading novels, go to green say. Faintly outside the medium-sized world, there seemed to be 2,999 strange existences forming at an extremely slow speed. These 2,999 strange existences were faintly discernible, as if they didn't exist at all. But they also seemed to be able to stand up to the dimensional realm and form an incomparably mysterious array formation with it. Time passed like flowing water during this process of change. In the Earth universe, among the infinite galaxies that could not be clearly described with numbers, there was an ordinary galaxy center that was not far from the Milky Way galaxy. In terms of the scale of the entire Earth universe, it could even be said to be close to the Milky Way galaxy. Luo Fan's main body in the Earth universe was floating somewhere dozens of light years away from the central singularity of the galaxy. His spiritual sense avatar was hidden in the world of power thousands of light years away from the main body, sensing from afar. Whether the main body of the primordial world had received the mysteries of the zenith heaven that he had sent out, and how it had acted after receiving it, he naturally could not be completely clear. However, he did not have the intention to investigate. At this moment, all his attention was focused on the strange existence in front of him that looked like a dark vortex. This strange vortex was as huge as millions of Earths. It was about the same size as the central star of the solar system, the Sun. Dozens of light years away, the gravitational force emitted by the singularity in the center of the galaxy was so huge that it could even prevent billions of stars in the entire galaxy from escaping. One could imagine the strength of the gravitational force that was only dozens of light years away from the singularity. However, in this position that was enough to distort the void and reveal countless strange lights and shadows, the vortex did not seem to be affected by the gravitational force at all. It rotated unhurriedly in the void, even vaguely drawing all kinds of strange existences in the void into the vortex, as if it was fighting against the incredible gravitational force in the center of the singularity. Luo Fan's eyes had the ability to see through the surface and see through the essence. After becoming a Khanate Zenith Heaven, this ability had become even more powerful to an unimaginable extent. He floated in the void and looked down, instantly seeing through the essence of this strange vortex. The vortex was the entrance to the Dong Tian, and also the projection of the Dong Tian in this Earth universe. Dong Tian was an alternate time and space, or a naturally existing alternate time and space attached to the Earth's universe. Or it could be created by powerful beings through various unfathomable methods and their own supreme understanding of time and space, distorting time and space to create it. The existence of this Dong Tian was obviously the former. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Dong Tian to leave such a projection in the Earth's universe. In other words, it would be impossible for such a vortex to appear here unless it was a naturally formed alternate space-time. The reason why he was so sure was because Luo Fan could only see that this was a projection of a different space-time with his outstanding eyesight. He couldn't see any traces of human activity in it, nor could he see any trace of the middle-aged man's aura or means. If it was in the past, Luo Fan might not have been confident in his own judgment. He felt that the middle-aged man's means might have surpassed his imagination. Even though the middle-aged man had set up various means and prepared various restrictions, Luo Fan was unable to see through them. However, that was not the case at this moment. At this moment, Luo Fan had already become a Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm. Even though he couldn't be said to be completely compatible with the Grand Tao, his compatibility with the Grand Tao had reached an extremely shocking level. He only needed to take a glance to know what was naturally formed and what was created by a divine ability. Unless the person who set up these means had attained a level that even he couldn't fathom, such as the Saint Realm. Based on his understanding of the middle-aged man, the middle-aged man was clearly not a saint, and the middle-aged man was merely a first heaven golden immortal realm cultivator. Since it was naturally formed, the threat it posed to Luo Fan was greatly reduced. Naturally formed environments might possess unimaginable destructive force, and it might even cause fatal damage to Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm cultivators. This was naturally a fact. After all, Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm cultivators were still tiny compared to the entire Earth's universe. They were still similar to ants compared to the Grand Tao. The vortex before him was clearly a natural existence that could harm Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm cultivators and could even be fatal. If it wasn't for that, the middle-aged man wouldn't have dared to casually place it here without setting up any defensive restrictions. If it was anyone else, it would naturally be the right thing to do. However, to Luo Fan, who possessed his spiritual clone, so long as it was a naturally formed environment, then the harm it could cause him would be reduced to a practically negligible level. It was the same for the vortex before him. If the middle-aged man had set up some defensive restrictions on the vortex, then it wouldn't have to be too complicated, nor would it have to be too powerful, and it would still cause some trouble for Luo Fan. However, merely relying on this vortex that could even harm a Khanate Golden Immortal Realm cultivator, it was practically like opening up a door to Luo Fan. He didn't even need his spiritual clone to make a move. With just a slight thought, he used the spiritual clone's perspective to observe that this was a vortex, and then he instantly found a path that allowed him to easily step into the vortex. After finding this path, a faint smile appeared on Luo Fan's face. He didn't hesitate to take a step forward, and his figure transformed into a twisting and spiraling ray of light. He directly went around the vortex in an extremely complicated path, and then he instantly charged into the depths of the vortex and vanished from the Earth's universe. How could he be so powerful? Didn't he only become a Khanate Grand Heavenly Realm 4,000 years ago? At this moment, a faint exclamation sounded out of nowhere. This person isn't simple. Another exclamation sounded out of nowhere. The entrance to Titian Mo's Dong Tian ranks within the top 3,000 to the 100,000 Dong Tian in the world in terms of danger. After it was occupied by Titian Mo, very few people entered it without knowing anything except for those who were invited by him. I didn't expect this person to be able to see the hidden chance of survival at a glance. It's really incredible. Another voice sounded. What a pity, what a pity. I thought the battle would take place outside the Dong Tian, but I didn't expect it to take place in the Dong Tian. It seems that I won't be able to watch a good show. A very regretful sigh sounded out. That person is really arrogant. Titian Mo's strength at least doubled after entering the Dong Tian. If it's outside the Dong Tian, although the entrance would be strangled by countless space-time elite weapons, it's not like there's no chance of victory. What a pity. A more regretful voice sounded out. What's the difference? The space-time elite weapon is a weapon condensed from space-time fragments. Every single one of them possesses the might to annihilate a Khanate Grand Luo realm cultivator. If it's activated here, that person probably won't even be able to resist a single attack and will be instantly obliterated. It's no different from entering the heavens. A cold voice resounded. Haha, I didn't expect the 9 Serenities goddess to be interested in this karma. It's really rare. A mocking voice suddenly sounded out. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. The voice was still cold, but the words that came out of it were not polite. Hee hee. The mocking voice only laughed, as if it was enjoying itself. Do you really think that this person can be mentioned in the same breath as Titian Mo? Don't forget that he has just become an innate Grand Luo. Without a million years of consolidation, he won't be able to unleash his true power. It's the stupidest thing to do to end the karma now. No matter where he chooses, only death awaits him. A gloating voice sounded out. Looks like this person doesn't have a master. The voice that sighed that it couldn't watch the show said regretfully, that should be the case. If he has a master, how could he not know the rule that after becoming an innate Grand Luo, no matter what kind of karma entanglement he has, he will have to wait for 1,000,000 years to settle it? If he can cultivate quietly for 1,000,000 years, Titian Mo won't be able to find trouble with him during this period of time. However, Titian Mo doesn't have any scruples when he sends himself to him. It's really a pity. A person who became an innate Grand Luo without a master in the Age of Chaos should have a bright future. An old man sighed. If you hadn't told him this before, how could he have been so reckless? The cold female voice coldly said, we didn't say anything, but can't he ask? He went to seek revenge without saying anything or asking anything. Even if he was dissuaded once, he will definitely make the same mistake in the future. If he makes the mistake now, he will only get himself killed. If he makes the same mistake in the future, he might even get us killed. How can such a person be a good person? A cold male voice came out of nowhere. It was like a bucket of ice water was poured into a fire, turning the lively scene that was like a market into a cold one. After a long while, a dry sigh was heard. Even so, it's still too much of a pity. Since the end of the age of cultivation, this person is the only one who became an innate Grand Luo in the past millions of years. No matter what the reason is, it's still a pity that he died just like that. There are fewer and fewer people like us. The scene of hundreds of thousands of innate Grand Luo cultivators having sex across space is still vivid in our minds. Now, there are only a few dozen of us left. I wonder how many of us will be left when this era ends. Sigh. His words caused the entire void to fall into a deathly silence. Love novels, fantasy novels, martial arts novels, science fiction novels, and other kinds of novels are available for download online. Please remember the website. If you like my book, Extraordinary Desolation, written by Extraordinary. Chapter 640. While these voices were being transmitted from various parts of the Earth's universe who were countless light years away, Luo Fan's spiritual sense doppelganger had always been hidden in that world of power and had heard all these kinds of sounds. First written novel, go to green say when reading novels. Although these words were spoken by the crowd, Luo Fan had already heard many secrets that he did not know in the past, and he understood the principles of many innate Zenith Heaven cultivators getting along with each other. It turns out that when a cultivator becomes an innate Zenith Heaven cultivator in the Earth universe, there will definitely be a million years of peace for him to consolidate his cultivation. No matter how great the enmity of others is, they can't seek revenge during this period of time. No wonder it's been so peaceful for the past 4,000 years, and no wonder there's no preparation for this so-called heavenly lifting heavens. Luo Fan thought so, but he did not feel the slightest regret for wasting the million years of time to consolidate his cultivation. After all, to him, even if he knew that he could have a million years to consolidate his cultivation, he would definitely not wait for a million years to find the middle-aged man to end his karma. This was not a problem of patience, but a problem of the Tao heart. To Luo Fan, he had suppressed this matter in his heart for a million years. If he did not have the ability to end his karma, he could reluctantly accept such a situation. However, if he had the ability to end this karma, it would be a great burden, and he would absolutely not be able to accept it. Evidently, Luo Fan had come here at this time, and he was naturally quite confident in ending his karma with a middle-aged man. It was not arrogance, but a confidence that came from a certain degree of confidence in the strength of both sides. Therefore, it could be said that whether Luo Fan knew about this unspoken rule or not, his actions would not change in the slightest. Under such circumstances, how could he regret it? Thinking about this, Luo Fan's spiritual sense clone smiled slightly. Without stopping, he attached himself to the power of space, and with a shake, he directly followed the extension of the power of space, instantly traversing the distance of thousands of light years in the Earth universe, and directly arrived outside the entrance of the heavenly lifting heavens. In the world of power, the vortex at the entrance of the sky lifting devil cave naturally did not exist in the form of a vortex. Instead, it formed a strange light barrier. The barrier of light contained a tremendous amount of power, or in other words, a tremendous amount of matter and energy. Around the barrier of light, the power of time and space intertwined with one another in a very unique way. As if the moment they were touched, the harmonious power of time and space would suddenly change drastically. All the powers would do their utmost to wipe out everything that touched them, even if it was a Khanate Grand Luo. After truly seeing the structure of the energy of time and space around the entrance of the heavenly lifting Dharma Dong, Luo Fan gained a deeper understanding of the words he heard from the conversations between the Xiantian Grand Luo realm cultivators. Go to Greensay when you read novels. Although the light barrier at the center looked extremely profound, the various powers contained within it were also extremely astonishing. However, it was not completely flawless. In reality, there was an extremely tiny hole right above the light barrier. The hole was extremely mysterious. Although it was extremely small, it seemed to contain everything within it. It was as if there was an endless amount of strange energy constantly seeping out from it. As long as Luo Fan was in front of everything in the world of power, it was impossible for him to know nothing about it. Even if the profundities contained within surpassed the limits of his understanding, he would definitely be able to understand some of the extremely simple things within, such as seeing the existence of these powers and knowing their range of influence. As a result, although the environment around the heavenly lifting Dharma Dong was extremely treacherous, and he would die under the combined effects of the power of time and space if he was not careful, he could clearly see the respective range of effect of these powers. Thus, he easily found a path that led directly to the hole in the light barrier. Therefore, he attached himself to the power of space, and his body moved along with it. He went around an extremely mysterious path, and after who knows how many billions of turns, he arrived right outside the tiny hole. He didn't stop at all. With a slight shake, he entered the hole. The moment he entered the hole, he felt an endless amount of strange power rush towards him. There was actually another world within this small hole. In the world of power, even space existed in the form of power. Naturally, there was no such thing as size. Even the entire Earth was essentially no different from a grain of sand to the Avatar. Therefore, the world that he saw when he drilled into the tiny hole was in fact no different from the world he saw in the outside world. when reading novels, go to green say. However, the power of space within this light barrier was actually at an unimaginable level. Between these countless powers of space, there were also countless powers that represented powerful life force attached to these powers of space. In the center of this innumerable powerful life forces, in addition to the main body, there's also a powerful life force that could dispel the power of space, but was still attached to the power of time. This life force exuded a strange aura that blocked all prying eyes. Even Luo Fan's spiritual sense doppelganger couldn't clearly see through it, let alone use the slightest ability to affect it. As expected, the cultivation of Khanate Grand Luo is self-contained. Although he can't transcend time, it's completely impossible to harm him by using the power of space. If I want to fight against the Khanate Grand Luo, I can only rely on my cultivation and my own power, Luo Fan's avatar thought to himself. However, he did not stop at all. He attached himself to the power of space and moved for a while. In the blink of an eye, he arrived outside an extremely strange place within the light barrier. This place was the place where the power of time and power of space were the most closely combined. It was also the place where all the power of space and power of time within the light barrier were the most closely connected. As long as the power of space in this place was completely removed, it would directly drive all the power of space and power of time within the light barrier, causing all the other powers to lose their attachment and instantly collapse and disappear. In other words, as long as Luo Fan's avatar was in this place, he could use all his power to remove the power of space and instantly destroy this heavenly lifting heavens. Therefore, this place could be said to be the hub of the heavenly lifting heavens. Controlling this place was equivalent to controlling the life and death of the entire heavenly lifting heavens. Since this place was so important, it was naturally impossible for there to be no defense. At this moment, there were countless mysterious powers circling around this place, forming an extremely complicated and strange structure that firmly enveloped and protected this hub. Any living creature that wanted to invade this place would have to bear the impact of all the power of the entire heavenly lifting heavens and the endless attack of the powerful life force. However, that was only for other living creatures. Go to green say when you read novels. For Luo Fan's avatar, all the defenses were quite troublesome, but they couldn't really stop him at all. His figure circled around countless places, made countless turns, and bypassed an unknown complicated track. Then, the power that his figure transformed into directly passed through the layers of defenses and arrived at that place. As he raised his hand and grabbed the air, he had already grasped the hub of the entire heavenly lifting heavens. When the hub was grasped by his avatar, Luo Fan, who had become a Khanate Grand Luo, didn't move, but a faint smile appeared on his face. At this moment, the main body of this Khanate Grand Luo cultivator was in a boundless world. This world was the heavenly lifting heavens. The pneuma that filled the entire world was between the Khanate and acquired. It didn't degenerate into the acquired essence of heaven and earth, but it was no longer the Khanate essence. Although this pneuma was not as pure and profound as the Khanate essence, it was of a much higher level than the acquired essence of heaven and earth. Moreover, there was an absolute advantage. It was not very difficult to convert this pneuma into Khanate essence. With 10,000 parts of this pneuma, one part of Khanate essence could be condensed. Sensing the profoundness of this pneuma, Luo Fan finally understood why there were so many Khanate cultivators around the middle-aged man. At the same time, he also understood why he was the only one who had become a Khanate Grand Luo among so many Khanate cultivators. After all, with this pneuma that was between the Khanate and acquired, it was not very difficult for the living creatures in this world to obtain the Khanate essence for cultivation. Therefore, many Khanate cultivators were born. Similarly, because this pneuma was between the Khanate and acquired, it was unimaginably difficult to convert it into Hun chaotic essence for cultivators to break through the gold core of the innate gold core. That middle-aged man might be able to do it, but he could only help a few people who had better aptitudes and were close to him. It was impossible for him to promote it. Because of this, although there were many connate cultivators, there were very few connate cultivators who could achieve the gold core of the innate gold core. At this time, Luo Fan was floating in the sky of this world. This world had a round sky and a square shape. The land was vast and flat. There were mountains, rivers, plateaus, swamps, mountains, hills, and even huge lakes and oceans. It looked primitive and desolate, but it was full of vitality. Go to Greensay when you read novels. The sun was hanging high in the sky, but there were many stars. It seemed that the light of these stars was even more dazzling than the sun. The light of the sun could not suppress them at all. In fact, Luo Fan could even faintly see many familiar stars and sense the various familiar auras emanating from those stars. After a slight analysis, he knew that these stars were the projections of many stars in the galaxy where this Dong Tian was located. They were extremely strong projections. The power contained in these projections was extremely amazing. It could be said that most of the starlight emitted by those stars had been pulled into these projections. Because of this, the light emitted by these stars would not be suppressed by the strong sunlight emitted by the sun. As a result, he could still see countless stars in the dazzling sunlight during the day. Lowering his head to observe carefully, he found that the land was not really barren. In fact, there were many cities in various places on the land. There were hundreds of millions of humanoid creatures living in these cities. He was cultivating. However, these cities were very compatible with the surrounding environment. They were completely different from the cities that Luo Fan had seen on Earth. It seemed that every city had been built after considering how to not cause too much damage to the surrounding environment. Not only did it make the numerous cities scattered all over the land not very conspicuous, it also made them strange, each with their own special features and mysteries. It's really a pretty good civilization. Luo Fan could not help but praise after observing carefully. What he admired was not the other things in this world, but the civilization created by the creatures in this world. This kind of civilization lived in harmony with nature. Even when building the cities, they would rather change the structure of the cities for the surrounding nature. It was almost the opposite of the civilization on Earth before Luo Fan traveled to this world. This kind of civilization might still have many weaknesses. However, for Luo Fan, he had a good impression of this kind of civilization. After all, it had characteristics that the civilization on Earth lacked. Therefore, he praised this kind of civilization. As for the strength of this world's space, which was more stable than that of a medium-class world, and the density of Numa was also higher than that of a medium-class world, he did not take it seriously. After all, although the strength of the space was more stable than that of a medium-class world, and the density of Numa was higher than that of a medium-class world, this world was still not a boundless world. It could still be said to belong to the category of a medium-class world. As for a medium-class world, Luo Fan could easily create it even before he achieved the Tai disintegration number. Now that he had become an innate Grand Luo, it would not be difficult for him to create a boundless world if he worked hard. Under such circumstances, how could he have any praise for the Dong Tian created by a cultivator of the innate Grand Luo, which still belonged to the category of a medium-class world? What's more, this Dong Tian was a naturally formed space that had been modified. This was even less difficult than opening up a separate Dong Tian. Under such circumstances, that innate Grand Luo realm cultivator still couldn't sublimate this Dong Tian into a boundless world. Luo Fan could already be considered to have an extremely good upbringing if he didn't look at him with disdain. I didn't expect that you would dare to enter my Dong Tian like this. I don't know whether I should praise you for your amazing courage or say that you are extremely stupid. An indifferent voice suddenly came out of nowhere and entered Luo Fan's ears. Luo Fan did not find it strange at all when he heard those words. He raised his head and looked at the grand sun in the sky, saying, "I've come to settle the karma with you. Why do you have to do it secretly?" His eyes shone brightly and directly penetrated the barrier of endless light, shining into the grand sun in the sky. and saw the true appearance of the grand sun. There was a void with a circumference of hundreds of millions of miles, and there was a huge ocean of innate vitality in the void. It was so wide and tens of thousands of miles deep. Right in the middle of this incomparably huge ocean of liquid innate yuan qi, there was a medium-sized island that seemed to be suppressing the entire ocean. This island was covered with strange flowers and plants. In the gaps between the flowers and plants, there were many buildings that formed a large building complex. There were all kinds of strange buildings in this building complex, and they all had different characteristics. However, they all had one thing in common, and that was that each building gave off a powerful aura and displayed some kind of profound Tao. In the center of this building complex, which was also the center of the entire island and the center of the entire ocean of innate vitality, was the square that Luo Fan had observed last time through the connection of karma. And the middle-aged man was also sitting on the extremely high platform in the center of the square. At this moment, the middle-aged man had stopped preaching to the cultivators below and raised his eyes to look at Luo Fan. When Luo Fan saw this scene, their eyes met, and it was as if the two of them were looking at each other face to face. You have such courage. Although it came from stupidity, it is still worthy of respect. I will give you a chance. Tell me your name. Perhaps I will remember you for a period of time after you die. The middle-aged man said indifferently, his face calm to the point of almost indifference. His words were so arrogant, but there was a sense of how natural it was. It simply filled the heavens and the earth, making people who heard it feel that this person was born to say such words to suit his status. If he did not say such words, it would be strange instead. Luo Fan naturally wouldn't be like this. When he heard these words, the expression on his face didn't change in the slightest. He indifferently said, "It turns out that you don't even know my name. I'm afraid that it's only because you've painstakingly made a move against me. At our level, what's the difference between painstaking effort and careful consideration? You were just lucky that I didn't kill you back then. Today, you've delivered yourself to me, so no matter what strange things you have, you won't be able to escape death. I have allowed you to die with my name, and that is already a great kindness. You must cherish it," the man said as if it were a matter of course. After listening to these words and combining them with his previous speculation, Luo Fan finally understood why this person attacked him back then. This person must have suddenly come to Chuyang several tens of thousands of years ago and discovered that there's something strange about me. It seems like I might be a threat to him in the future, so he directly made a move to kill me to eliminate this possible threat to him in the future. I didn't expect this to be the truth. Fate is always like this. Luo Fan sighed to himself. Although he sighed, his expression didn't change at all, and his gaze didn't change at all. He was still looking at the middle-aged man calmly from afar. As for the middle-aged man's extremely arrogant words, he didn't take them to heart at all, and it was impossible for him to feel even the slightest bit angry because of it. Only the minds of mortals would be affected by the opponent's words and attitude. Currently, Luo Fan had already become a Kane Grand Luo. So how could he make such a mistake? Romance novels, fantasy novels, wuxia novels, science fiction novels, and all kinds of novels are available for download online. If you like my book, Extraordinary Desolation, written by Extraordinary, please remember the website. Chapter 641. Someone's actually entered the sky again. Right at this moment, Luo Fan suddenly had a thought, and a thought flashed through his mind. Text first. Arrived at Green Sea, however, in that instant, he faintly felt a strange aura penetrate the entrance of the sky, lifting rumbling heavens, and enter this world. This aura was obscure to the extreme. It didn't cause any changes in the sky at all. It didn't even cause a trace of fluctuation in space or energy, and it was even to the extent that even the profound senses of a golden immortal realm cultivator were unable to notice any sign of that aura. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan should absolutely be unable to detect the existence of this aura. However, it was extremely strange that he sensed it at the instant it entered the sky. Although it was slightly vague, he directly knew how the aura entered the sky and how it moved in the sky. The aura moved extremely quickly. In just a blink of an eye, it had already arrived at the edge of the sun in the sky. After that, it stopped there and used an unbelievable method to conceal itself as if it was waiting for something. Luo Fan's intelligence was extremely penetrating. He instantly knew the purpose of this aura, and he also knew why he could detect the existence of this aura so easily. This aura obviously belonged to an innate golden heavenly realm cultivator who specialized in concealment and sneak attacks. The reason why he could detect the existence of this aura so easily should be that this innate golden heavenly realm cultivator wanted him to reveal himself so that he could detect his existence, so that he could cooperate with him to teach the middle-aged man a lesson. When he understood this, Luo Fan couldn't help but smile bitterly. I didn't expect that person to actually have enemies. Looks like I'm just in time this time. But it's fine. This person tried to kill me once, so I'll try my best to kill him this time. As for whether I can really kill him or not, the karma this time can be considered to be settled. When Luo Fan thought about this, he didn't care about the aura anymore. He turned to the middle-aged man and said, "Cut the crap. If you're really capable, then do it." As Luo Fan spoke, he lifted his foot and stomped on the ground. A loud rumbling sound instantly spread throughout the entire world. In an instant, the land that spanned hundreds of millions of miles in this world began to shake. Following the tremors, all sorts of strange powers began to surge from the ground towards where Luo Fan was standing. Moreover, their speed was indescribably fast. In just an instant, they directly condensed into a ball under his feet, turning into a lotus platform that lifted him up. Go to green say when you read novels. After this power condensed, the ground of this entire world seemed to undergo some sort of strange change. It was as if it had lost its spirit and vitality. The feeling of vitality that he originally gave off had instantly faded a lot. The expression on the middle-aged man's face didn't change in the slightest. He raised his hand and gently pressed down on the high platform. In an instant, boundless brilliance burst out from the great sun and formed a huge palm of light in the void. It directly pressed down towards where Luo Fan was. This palm was extremely solid. Although it was formed by light, it seemed to be real. The power contained in it was extremely familiar to Luo Fan. It was the power of the palm that Luo Fan had encountered more than 100,000 years ago. However, the power contained in this palm was more than 10,000 times stronger than before. This palm was tens of thousands of miles in circumference when it was first formed. However, as it continued to descend, its size kept shrinking. When it finally arrived above Luo Fan's head, the palm had already shrunk to a circumference of 10 feet. To be able to compress power to such an extent, the degree of concentration of this palm had reached an unimaginable level. Even the void in the sky seemed to be unable to withstand the existence of this palm. The void within a circumference of thousands of feet around the palm twisted wildly. All sorts of strange light and shadows appeared in this void. At the same time, Luo Fan also felt an indescribable pressure emanating from the palm. It directly acted on his will, wanting to disintegrate his will, repel all of his resistance, and directly kill him. Seeing this, Luo Fan's expression didn't change at all. Look, with a casual point of his finger, the lotus platform under his feet trembled slightly and released endless brilliance. It turned into a sharp awl and condensed from all directions. It wrapped around his body and directly faced the palm that was descending from the sky. Poof! A soft sound rang out. The palm collided with the tip of the awl, and an earth-shattering reaction occurred in an instant. Boundless spatial powder was produced in an instant, and the void within a radius of tens of thousands of feet collapsed without any reaction. It turned into the finest powder in the world, constantly tumbling and expanding. Go to green say when you read novels. At the same time, large areas of the earth collapsed, and the whole world fell into a violent tremor. Endless cries, angry roars, prayers, and pleas rose up from everywhere. It made the lively world seem like it was the end of the world. It's really cruel. Luo Fan didn't receive any impact at this time. so he sighed inwardly. What he resisted the attack of the palm was condensed by him. It could be said that the entire Dong Tian was connected with the earth of the whole Dong Tian. Destroying the lotus platform was equivalent to destroying the earth of the Dong Tian, which was equivalent to destroying the entire Dong Tian. However, even so, the middle-aged man in front of him didn't hesitate at all. It was as if the lotus platform was condensed by the simplest power. He would do whatever he wanted, even if it would almost cause irreparable damage to the Dong Tian. From this, one could see how firm the middle-aged man's will was and how ruthless he was. Since the middle-aged man didn't care, there was no reason for Luo Fan to care. Although he had a good impression of this civilization had nothing to do with him. Even if it was destroyed in this battle, he would at most feel sorry for it, but he wouldn't feel guilty. He wasn't a moral person, and he wasn't that compassionate. Because of this, Luo Fan did not hesitate, even though he knew that the Dongtian world would be destroyed if he lost even a little bit of the origin energy of the earth. He still controlled the origin energy of the earth to form various strange shapes to block the palm above him, trying his best to weaken the power of the palm. The power in that palm had entangled him for 100,000 years, so he was naturally very familiar with it. Every time he controlled the earth's origin to block the power, he would attack the weakest point of the power. Every bit of the earth's origin would weaken the power of the palm to the greatest extent. In the end, when the power of the palm was completely eliminated, there was still a small layer of light on the lotus platform. Although it wasn't as solid as before, it still existed. The result of the collision just now was that the void within 100,000 miles was completely turned into dust, and the earth was shattered into countless pieces. The entire Dong Tian was fragmented. Pieces of the earth were surrounded by magma, flames, and black fog. Black and white smoke rose from everywhere, and pillars of smoke decorated the world that looked like it was the end of the world. Go to Greensay when you read novels. At this moment, the miserable cries of the various living beings in the Dong Tian were so weak that they couldn't be heard. It was obvious that almost all the living beings had been wiped out in the collision just now. Only a small number of lucky or powerful living beings were still alive, and they could still make all kinds of miserable cries. One could imagine how miserable this scene was. Seeing this scene, Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh, although he had expected it. He didn't feel guilty about this scene at all. After all, he wasn't the one who caused this. It was the owner of the Dong Tian, the middle-aged man. The reason why he said this was not because he was trying to shirk his responsibility, but because he knew that the middle-aged man was the owner of the Dong Tian. Everything in the Dong Tian was under his control. Although he gathered the earth's origin of the Dong Tian to block the attack, the middle-aged man was definitely able to find another way to bypass the earth's origin. Although it would be more troublesome, it wasn't a difficult thing to do. However, the middle-aged man didn't care about it and directly suppressed it. He would rather ignore the living beings in the Dong Tian for a little bit of relief. Therefore, this situation happened. Luo Fan didn't have any doubts about who should be responsible for this. Maybe some people thought that this was because Luo Fan gathered the Earth's origin of the Dong Tian in one place, which caused this disaster. They thought that he was the one who should be responsible for this disaster, and he should be the one who should be responsible for it. Of course, this view was ridiculous. If someone hurt his hand to destroy something, would he blame the thing for being too hard? Are you trying to show that you don't feel threatened? But what about the living beings? Luo Fan said coldly, all the living beings in the Dong Tian were created by me. Why can't I take back the life I gave them? The middle-aged man said as if it was a matter of course. It's pitiful that they were still calling for you and worshiping you before they died. Luo Fan sighed again. As he spoke, he took a light step forward. His body stepped on the void, as if he was walking on an invisible flight of stairs. He seemed to be moving slowly, but he was moving very fast. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the edge of the sun. He was facing the innate Zenith Heaven Realm cultivator who had sneaked into the Dong Tian. He was sandwiching the sun in the middle. As he left, the lotus platform formed by the Earth's origin of the Dong Tian collapsed and disappeared. It turned back into the Earth's origin of the Earth and merged with the Earth. During this process, the Earth of the Dong Tian started to stop shaking. The destruction of the Earth didn't change much, but the doomsday aura had weakened a lot. It looked like the end of the world had just passed, and only Yu Bo was still shaking. As Luo Fan walked, his body faintly merged with the void around him. Although he was walking, he didn't show any flaws. There were traces of openings, and it was no different from standing on the spot, ready to strike at any moment. At this moment, the middle-aged man frowned slightly and finally stood up. He didn't need to do anything else. His body appeared on the sun out of thin air. He hovered in the void and faced Luo Fan from afar. Judging from his appearance, he obviously didn't notice the innate Zenith Heaven Realm cultivator who had entered the Dong Tian after Luo Fan. This made Luo Fan even more certain of his speculation. Looks like compared to the beings below, the cultivators here are more important to you, Luo Fan said calmly when he saw the middle-aged man finally leaving his throne. They have a chance to grow to the point where they can help me. Naturally, they're more important than those ants, the middle-aged man said as he emitted an inviolable aura. At this moment, the chaotic mass of air behind the middle-aged man's head was still there. The aura of the perfected heaven realm had skyrocketed. When he appeared outside the sun, the aura of the perfected heaven realm instantly spread throughout the entire Dong Tian. At that moment, when Luo Fan faced this person, he faintly felt as if he was being rejected by the entire world. It was as if endless attacks could descend on him at any moment. After analyzing it carefully, the rules of the entire Dong Tian seemed to have come alive at this moment. They turned into living beings that were hostile to Luo Fan. So this is how the master of the Dong Tian should behave. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. However, although he was rejected by the entire Dong Tian and felt the hostility of the rules, Luo Fan didn't panic at all. He was still confident. To others, this might be fatal, but to him, it was nothing. Moreover, he noticed that when the middle-aged man left the sun and appeared outside, the aura hidden in the other direction of the sun seemed to have become more active. It seemed like it was going to attack at any time. When Luo Fan noticed the change in the aura, he immediately changed his mind. With a thought, a sphere appeared in front of him. It was emitting a mysterious primordial unity aura. It was the primordial unity mystic treasure that he had refined in the past. At the same time, the shape of the air mass appeared behind his head. An aura of perfection emanated from him, directly changing the laws within a radius of several tens of feet around him, causing the hostility contained within the laws to instantly disappear, as if they had never appeared in the first place. Innate grand immortal realm cultivators had always been independent, and all sorts of adverse environments were nothing to innate grand immortal realm cultivators. As long as the innate grand Luo cultivators wanted to, the environment around them would naturally return to the most beneficial state for them. Even if the environment had been changed by other innate grand Luo cultivators, it would still be the same. As for whether or not the environment had been changed by other innate grand Luo cultivators, the only difference was the size of the change. Just like this moment. If the rules were formed naturally without the middle-aged man's will, the rules within several tens of thousands of kilometers would be changed naturally, and not just within several feet. When the middle-aged man saw the ball of air behind Luo Fan's head, he frowned slightly and said, "It's already rare for a grand Luo to form an embryonic form in 4,000 years. But he's courting death if he dares to cause trouble for me with just this." As he spoke, he seemed to have figured out Luo Fan's trump card. He casually grabbed at the air, and a strange ray of light shot out of his body and condensed into his fingers. Then, he suddenly released it and enveloped Luo Fan. The ray of light was dark purple in color. It was so condensed that it seemed material. It revealed an extremely tough and ferocious baleful chi. The baleful chi was so strong that it had reached an unimaginable level. It dispersed into the air and condensed into a boundless hell sea of blood. Countless dangers and killings surged endlessly in it. If the light in the winter world did not come from the sun in front and not the sky above, the world would have darkened at the instant the light appeared. Even the entire sky would be covered by it. It was easy to imagine how powerful the light that emitted such baleful chi was. Even the rules and laws of the Dong Tian world naturally submitted to the light. In an instant, countless rules and laws attached themselves to the purple light, causing the aura of the light to skyrocket. The illusory world formed by the baleful chi above it became more solid and expanded. Finally, it turned into a real hell sea of blood with a circumference of tens of millions of miles. Endless roars and howls came out of the Dong Tian world, causing the aura of doomsday that was gradually fading to skyrocket again. It was as if the Dong Tian world had entered a new round of doomsday storm. The purple light changed along with the middle-aged man's palm. In an instant, it came to Luo Fan's body and condensed into a solid purple sharp claw. Then, it fiercely smashed toward Luo Fan. The strength of the claw not only shattered the void, but also distorted time. The past, present, and future became Hunwan. The moment the sharp claw reached Luo Fan, it was divided into billions of parts. The parts kept reversing and repeating. Sometimes, it even flipped back to the beginning. For Luo Fan, such an experience felt like time had been stretched infinitely. It even felt like billions of sharp claws were trying to scratch him. The surroundings seemed to have been completely isolated. The void within a radius of several feet from his body seemed to have been separated from the Dongtian world and thrown into the Hun-Wan space-time. All sorts of strange and inconceivable scenes appeared one after another, impacting his soul. However, even so, Luo Fan did not panic. When the purple light appeared, he knew that it was a magic treasure, and it could even be a mysterious magic treasure that was at the same level as a primordial unity treasure. Although such a magic treasure was powerful, its nature determined that it could not be resisted by the magic treasure in his hand. Even if the magic treasure had the support of the whole Dongtian world, and its magical effects were greatly enhanced, it could not easily break through the defense of his magic treasure. There would definitely be some entanglement. As long as the two magic treasures were entangled together, the middle-aged man, Ti Tianma, would be in trouble. Romance novels, Xuanhuan novels, wuxia novels, science fiction novels, and other kinds of novels can be downloaded online. Please remember the website. If you like my book, Extraordinary Desolation, written by me in Extraordinary Desolation,